Thank you all for joining us. We have a very esteemed panel today, and we look forward to having a very good discussion and a very good presentation. First, I would welcome Pratap Heblikar, sir, trustee at the Institute for Contemporary Studies, Bangalore, our partner in hosting this event today. And Heblikar, sir, himself has been involved with internal security for a long time, and he has been part of the intelligence agency for almost 39 years, among the rare set of people who have been throughout in that organization right from the beginning. I am going to be doing a very short introduction to people. I think the panel is extremely eminent and everybody knows them. So, Heblikar, sir, over to you for the welcome address and the opening address.
Thank you, Arnab. Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening to everybody who's on the screen today. On behalf of the Institute of Contemporary Studies, Bangalore, and the Maritime Research Center, Pune, I extend a warm welcome to all of you. We are happy that you have been able to find time to join us today on a subject which has national importance and of relevance to our countries in the neighborhood. The Institute of Contemporary Studies Bangalore was set up in 1998 by a group of 6 former police officers who had served in different organizations of the Government of India, as also their own police forces in their respective states. The objective of the aim of the institute was to become a platform for informed discussions on matters related to law and order, jurisprudence, and jail reforms. And their services were used extensively by the National Human Rights Commission, the National Law Commission, the National Law School of India University, the West Bengal Juridical Academy, and others. And in 2011, they decided to make way for younger generation of people, and I was brought in to become the managing trustee. And while we retained the character of the institute, we decided that we will branch out into other areas of national security, because that was very, very important at that point of time. So right from 2011 to 2021, the institute has partnered with many like-minded organizations, governments, and state governments in trying to educate and inform people about the role of what is national security and what its various areas of interest are, what are India's views, what are India's relationship with its neighboring countries, friendly countries, and others. In 2020, along with 2 other think tanks, the Chennai Center for China Studies and the Press Institute of India, we started on a series of webinars called Deciphering China. And it was a 4-part webinar in which we talked about the Chinese Communist Party, China in the maritime context, the Chinese prowess in cybersecurity, and in the Chinese media landscape. That's where I was able to meet with Arnab Das. He spoke on the subject, which we are platform, which we stand on the platform today. We were very impressed, and we offered that we should join together in taking this, making this subject more popular and widespread among all stakeholders. The Institute of Contemporary Studies has had some experience in imparting training to the Karnataka police in coastal security. And we have done it on 3 occasions. And I think on each occasion, we have met the satisfaction levels of the state police. We also shared our experience with the Department of Finance, the Ministry of Finance, Customs Department, in training their people who use for maritime security and preventive wing of the customs. So we have a number of such synergies available with us, which we are trying to make use at regular intervals. We thought that we could supplement or complement Arnab's efforts in the right direction. So that was the beginning of the journey. And we have now been together for the last 1.5 years. And baby steps have been taken. And I'm sure that we will be able to expand the strides further. I would also, while welcoming you all, like to mention that we have representatives from the Ministry of Defense in Maldives, senior think tankers and members of the Sri Lankan Defense Forces, and also friends from Singapore who have responded to our request to partake of our event today. On behalf of the MRC and the ICSB, I extend to them a very warm welcome. Mrs. Geeta Varadhan, a distinguished colleague of ours who was Secretary Department of Space, was to have joined us today. Unfortunately, due to her indisposition, she is unable to do so. She has requested to be excused. We will miss her, but we hope that we will be able to get from her at some subsequent time salient points of what she would have used to address us today. While I will just try and limit myself to some of the points on India's security situation, I will leave it to the experts like my colleagues, Mr. Raghavan and Mr. Alok Joshi, and others to expand on the subject, to enlighten us and to educate us on what is happening in our neighborhood and what we need to look at from the point of view of underwater domain awareness or maritime awareness. As I look at it, presently India seems to be in a very exciting phase of trying to build a new national security policy wherein it would like us to understand what are its strengths, what are its objectives, and what are its interests. Towards that, there have been several important developments in the last couple of months. The most important one, however, was a fortnight ago when the government unveiled its policy to open up the space sector to private industry participation. I think this had been a long-standing demand of the private sector. I think that has been addressed, and we need to see what trajectory it takes in the next couple of years. Likewise, the long-awaited military organization is also underway, and as it takes shape, we hope to see more opportunities and chances for people like us to participate in some of its activities. As I speak, there are several agencies in the government of India who seem interested in what we are doing. For example, when we had this 4-part webinar on China, the National Security Council Secretariat was very interested in its outcome. We shared the report with them. A few months ago, we had another webinar on the international rare earth market and what was China's role in it. The report is finalized and is being submitted to the government with its recommendations. We had an extraordinarily good panel, not only Indian experts, but experts from Australia, Japan, and the US, members of the Quad, who were able to give us a sense of what is happening. And there also, the fact which was underlined was on maritime domain awareness and underwater domain awareness. I think there is a lot of interest in what is happening and what people would like to do. In sync with the policies of the government of India, we have a new cybersecurity policy that seems to be ready to be unveiled. The first policy came out in 2013. I think the next one should be out very soon, and we will see an enormous change in what the government had planned in 2013 and what is planned for 2021 and beyond. The effects of the coronavirus pandemic has been unprecedented and resulted in a slew of urgent reforms in our governance systems, some of which embrace the strategic and security sectors. This is a much needed wake-up call for us that we can no longer remain in the status quo. anti-position. We need to move on. We need to look at how what lessons have been learned and what are the steps that we need to take to fortify ourselves for the future. Just to talk about the neighborhood, I don't want to say much more about what is happening. We have colleagues and experts on this subject. But suffice to say, the US withdrawal from Afghanistan and the sharp deterioration of relations with China has brought in urgent efforts to reshape and reinvigorate the national security and governance systems. For example, now most of our refineries on the west coast of India, which were earlier we thought were safe, away from any threats, as long as the Americans were in Afghanistan, we now will become more vulnerable to threats that could emanate on the west coast. And there may be other areas which we need to focus upon. And as I said, it is quite unlikely that the relations with Pakistan and China will improve in the short or medium term. And land border issues will continue to hold the relations to ransom. This position remains unchanged since Pakistan's efforts in 1948 to annex Kashmir. While this is a given, both Pakistan and China will continue to destabilize India's relationship with its neighbors and other traditional friends. The recent developments in Bangladesh is one such manifestation, and there are others playing out elsewhere. In our assessment of the security situation in India's neighborhood, it may be worthwhile to consider several areas of strength, opportunities, and leverage that exist in India's favor, and additional mileage can be drawn out of it as and when we want to engage with our neighbors, as we have been doing on a continuous process. For example, the vaccine diplomacy has brought in, added to our strength in these countries. Two areas of interest that need to be brought to the fore. The first is that India's neighbors now do not see India as a threat. They see India more as an opportunity, as a destination, as a partnership for economic development. And likewise, they also realize that they cannot continue to provide anti-India sanctuaries. If these two are something that we need to understand, that there is a lot of activity by way of investment, of friendship and partnership that can take place. Now let me turn to today's subject. Maritime security and cyber security have emerged as critical subtext of India's national security policy. The Honorable Prime Minister has articulated this at several fora, including his recent address to the United Nations Security Council in August 2021, where he spoke on enhancing maritime security and made a case for international cooperation. This was truly path-making, given the kind of vehemence and the force that he brought to the subject. The Prime Minister has also underlined, both in India as elsewhere, the continuing importance on reliance of technology in our systems of governance, and his championing the Digital India mission is making rapid strides, not only locally, but also in several international destinations. It has been said the 21st century is a century of the seas. More than 70% of the Earth's surface is covered with water, and more than 80% of humanity lives within 200 nautical miles of the coast. Further, over 90% of the world's trade is carried across the seas. I think this is statistics that is very, very relevant to what we are discussing today. The Prime Minister Modi and his advisors, however, realize that India, being surrounded by water on three sides, is in fact an island country. 90% of India's trade by volume and 72% by value is carried across seas. Policies such as Make in India, Sabka Sath, Sabka Vikas, Atmanirbhar, Neighborhood First policy are all dependent on safe seas, which is something that we need to keep very close watch on this. And the Prime Minister also enunciated the Sagar, or the security and growth for all in the region, highlighted our blue economy, articulated the concept of Indo-Pacific, or initiated the Sagarmala project, and joined the quadrilateral security dialogue. All the above policies, ladies and gentlemen, have maritime medium as the backbone, and clearly maritime security and national security has been given the highest importance by the political levels in India. The maritime sector is getting attention of the government, which is unprecedented in recent times. This is evident not only from the public statements of the political brass, but also by military chiefs and others. The MDA and UDA are expected to get more focus and attention now, more now than in the past. This subject was also discussed in a very comprehensive manner at the recently concluded 3-day Indo-Pacific Regional Dialogue, which was held from October 27th to 29th and was co-hosted by the Indian Navy and the Indian Maritime Foundation. I was able to sit through a few of the sessions, and I came away with the understanding that the kind of interest there is in the subject, especially on MDA followed by UDA, I think we are now sailing in the right direction. I think we will have more impetus, more encouragement coming across in this sector. I was also reading about some of the instances during the American Civil War, during the First World War and the Second World War, where underwater expeditions or operations were mounted by one party against the other. And the most daring operation was on the Australian attack on Singapore during the Japanese occupation of Singapore. It's called the Royal Australian Navy's vessel called Crate, which carried out an attack on the Japanese military vessels in Singapore harbor. So there have been a large number of cases in our neighborhood too. The LTTE also utilized some of these facilities to carry out its own operations. It's a very interesting subject. And I think as we move away from whatever we have done across in the maritime domain awareness, the underwater domain awareness is now taking on a very important role as to how to monitor, how to supervise, or how to keep surveillance of whatever happens below the water or in the maritime space. So, as I said, that the Maritime Research Center in Pune and its partner NirDhwani Technologies, who are now been in this space for the last 4 or 5 years, have made substantial progress in trying to educate and inform not only the government, the state governments, and all the other stakeholders in what UDA is all about, why we need to focus more on it, and how it will help us not only in one particular branch of underwater awareness, but also in other areas that are necessary. For example, today in one of the subjects that was discussed today or yesterday at the Indo-Pacific Regional Dialogue was port-led maritime development activities. How can UDA help major ports in trying to get the better results for themselves? Or in inland waterway system. So I think there is a lot of things that UDA can bring to the table. We need not look at it only as a security vertical. I think UDA should not be focusing itself in silos, but also look at salience across all the sectors where it is required. And I think with the growing emphasis on Atmanirbhar program, and also on the emphasis in trying to create a bigger audience for itself, um, the MRC is, I think, in the right direction. I think we should not like to, say take the focus away from the strategic or security aspects. Yes, we require more of this in on the west coast and on the east coast, and particularly in states like Odisha and others, which are going to become very important as the Quad progresses in its activities. And I think between Vizag and West Bengal, uh, the largest port is in Odisha itself. I think we have a lot of needs that to be done, and UDA is going to be very, very important in its many manifestations. Apart from what we intend doing with partnership with ICSB and MRC, is to look at taking our combined strengths to create the concept of smart ports, or using smart city concept for ports, make them more viable and economically more profitable. I mean, this is applicable across the board. You can do it at river ports, like what's happening in Assam, or on the west coast and the east coast. I think the the opportunities are huge, and then we need to look at it in a very organized manner. And there are a large number of technologies that are necessary that can be seen. Arnab, of course, at some point of time will tell us what you look at UDA from his perspective. But my feeling is that we need to create a link between the military uses of UDA, technology, universities, and private sector. I think unless we bring these four captains of development together, we will not be headed in the right direction, or we may not be catching up speed in the right direction. And before I end, I would like to make an appeal to our colleagues from Maldives, from Sri Lanka, and from Singapore. Please do join us in our endeavors. It will be having mutual benefit. We could look at training, we could look at technological innovations wherever you require. For example, Maldives may require more of our synergies because of the huge responsibilities it has, Sri Lanka as well, and Singapore, of course, where Arnav has had plenty of experience of dealing with this subject there. And as far as we are concerned, we have a very vibrant program set out for 2021 and 2022. We would like all of you to return and join us on this journey, and I'm sure that with your support, our efforts will be successful. So with this, I think I will conclude. I'll take a breath and hand it back to Arnold to take forward the proceedings. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, sir. I think it was a very good start, and you gave a good broad canvas for us to commence the discussion. I once again welcome all our participants and the esteemed panelists. I would like to make a small presentation and to give you a sense of what the UDA framework is all about and what are the specific issues that merit your attention and merit your participation. So broadly, I mean, today we are dealing with a very specific aspect of internal and coastal security. But I would like to just also give you a broad perspective on what the UDA framework is all about. And it is basically taking India and the region, I mean, I would like to say Indo-Pacific region towards digital oceans. I'll try and cover the geostrategic context, India in the 21st century, what the UDA framework is all about, some of our work and some of our efforts and some of the recognitions that we have been able to achieve so far, and some small submission in terms of way ahead. I mean, we have some very senior people who are going to be looking at things today. And this is just a feed for them to kind of appreciate what our ideas are, and then we will seek their guidance in taking this forward. So, if you look at India, the global order in the 21st century, typically we saw during the Cold War period, it was the a different region. It is largely the temperate and the polar region where the maritime interaction or the maritime engagements were. But today, it is very clearly the tropical waters, and it is very important for us to appreciate that the maritime interactions in the 21st century have a very, very unique political, economic, military, and physical kind of uh, facet which needs to be understood. And I would like to explain that in a couple of slides after this. The Indo-Pacific strategic space straightaway is the tropical waters of the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. So that brings a very, very clear challenge as well as an opportunity. The technology development, if you try to understand during the Cold War period, and particularly pertaining to the underwater domain or the maritime domain, happened for the temperate waters or the polar waters. And the same thing is not applicable in the tropical waters. The tropical waters behave in a very, very different manner. So when we are looking at our strategies, we have to be extremely aware of this aspect. India in the 21st century, we have a declared Sagar vision, which actually puts security and growth. And I think we had Mr. Sanjay Baru on our platform once, and he said that, Arnav, this is unfortunate that the security word comes before growth. And sometimes it happens that our policymakers give more attention to security, whereas both are equally important and need to be treated like that. We have a nuclear power. We are a nuclear powered nation with no first use. So, what is a credible second strike capability is something we need to look at. And I think it is the strategic submarine. So, how do we, again, the UDA becomes so very important. How do we deploy these strategic platforms in a very, very, effective manner? India has a military maritime strategy before we have a grand maritime strategy. So this is something we need to be aware of, and because the coordination that we expect would not be achieved unless all the stakeholders are brought together. We aspire to be a global power, and I think we are almost there. So without significant maritime capacity building, we can't aspire to be a global power. So I think there's a lot of work to be done in terms of our maritime capacity and capability building. As we look at maritime activities or maritime growth, we have to be also mindful of the sustainability issue. And as we talk, I think in COP26 is right around the corner, and there's going to be huge amount of discussion there. So are we really there in terms of the sustainable growth that we desire or we are expected to look at? I mean, these are some of the incidents which indicate a catastrophic degradation in the underwater domain or the maritime domain, and we need to really figure out whether we are in the right direction. More importantly, I mean, when we talk about underwater, the freshwater crisis is another important area we need to, and so the water resource management is also a very, very important part of the underwater domain awareness that we talk about. And I think as we talk right now, there is a 20% shortage of domestic water or fresh water available to us in India. And in the next 10 years, it is likely to go up to, the crisis is in some parts, it may go up to about almost 80%. So are we really looking at it very seriously? What needs to be done? I think other issues. And I think from an internal security perspective, water crisis, I think, or the freshwater crisis will be a very, very important issue. But a bigger threat, if you allow me to put forward, is the water quality management. There are already some areas, there are various reasons. I mean, there are certain natural reasons. And today, after the pandemic, I think weaponizing of the water quality is also a very, very real possibility. So we have to have systems where we can monitor water quality. I mean, the water that is available to you on your tap, is it fit for consumption, or is it fit for use, or whatever use we want, whether it is domestic use or industrial use? Do we have the right wherewithal or the right framework or the right infrastructure to monitor this? And what are the measures that we, and I mean, if we can bring this graded approach, we can actually manage water resource management also effectively. I mean, we see that a lot of fresh water with reasonable quality is being used for industrial purpose. I mean, so we need to look at it very, very comprehensively, and this cannot be something which we take for granted. I mean, these are issues we need to flag when we look at internal security also. Now, as Pratap Heblikar sir also mentioned, maritime domain awareness became a buzzword, particularly after the 9/11 in the US. I mean, globally, everybody started talking about maritime domain awareness. There's a lot of work also that happened post that. In India or the Indian subcontinent, it was the 26/11 which triggered a whole lot of efforts and also political attention for maritime domain awareness. But my worry is that this MDA or maritime domain awareness remained event-driven and security-driven. So the participation of the other stakeholders somehow remained limited. And I don't think in a democracy like ours or in many other parts of the world, we can expect the security budget to kind of take care of everything. And there are so many other issues which are connected. So we have to have a very, very comprehensive strategy where all the stakeholders kind of coming together and contribute towards developing the domain awareness. And that domain awareness is probably the start point for any governance also. So when we look at the underwater domain, there are primarily 4 stakeholders which we need to kind of take note of. The maritime security, or let me not use the word maritime security as such, because even the freshwaters are very, very important. We have such massive projects or mega projects announced by the government. The inland water transport is a huge project that we are talking about. And what about underwater security there? So maritime security may not be the appropriate word. National security probably is the right word. And blue economy, there are so many opportunities that we look at. Environmental regulators and disaster management and pure science and technology. How do we bring in more and more science and technology into this whole framework? And particularly when we talk about the tropical waters, the import of technology has really not helped us. So without indigenous effort, I don't think we will achieve what we want to achieve. So, I mean, today underwater robotics is really is very real. Asymmetric threats because of the volatile political situation in our part of the world. Now this is becoming so accessible. I mean, even young students are into underwater robotics, or robotics is a very, very popular subject. And I think everybody realizes that this is something which can be done only by youngsters. So we have to be very, very clear and aware of what the threats are, and also we can use them as opportunities. I mean, we had the Kasab incident. He came by a surface boat. Do we expect the next guy to also come by a surface boat? And what happens if there is an underwater threat or an underwater incident in any of our strategic assets? Let me not name any one of them. Then this migration is going to be a huge issue. I mean, Rohingya crisis is just a tip of the iceberg, but I think with the climate change, sea level rise, there is a whole lot of things we are going to expect. And probably the eastern coast is a little more vulnerable. But I think this is something we need to take note of and kind of be very careful in terms of the security perspective. Blue economy. And again, if we do not bring the right governance framework, this all leads to crisis, and it then becomes a security problem. I mean, the energy security is very, very serious issue when we look at the Indian Ocean. On one side, we have the hungry economies which look for energy supplies, and the other side is the energy supplies. So this becomes a very, very important hub for energy security, and that triggers a whole lot of political, economic, and military action. The second is the second picture that you see is of fishing. I mean, fishing globally has been in the unorganized sector, but the regulations have been very, very poor, and somehow we see the since 1996, the fish stock has been on the decline. But the bycatch, which is, the wastage is of the order of 80%. So how do we reconcile the two? Can we not bring in proper monitoring, proper regulatory framework? And most important in the underwater domain is the monitoring mechanism. Regulation is one side of the coin, but unless we have very effective monitoring mechanism, the regulations will not be implemented. So again, it's a issue that requires very different approach. We have these strategic assets, offshore oil rigs and all these things, their impact on the environment, their security requirement, and also their use of underwater technology. And the deep sea mission, I mean, we had this announcement yesterday also by the minister, MOES, on India's manned deep sea mission. So I think the government is very serious, but I think there is a requirement of a whole of nation approach. It can't be that the stakeholders are working in their own compartments. Now, just to take it further, if we look at the inland waters also, I mean, fisheries, keeping our waters navigable, a whole lot of availability of our ports in terms of the siltation. I mean, tropical waters have a very unique siltation pattern. I mean, even the Uttarakhand incident, I mean, the flash floods, they all have a connection with the sediment management issue. So again, we need to look at this both, I mean, from the maritime and the inland water or the internal aspects we need to kind of take note of. Environment, with so much increasing activities, the noise in the underwater domain has become a very serious issue. My book is on this subject. The global community is taking note of it. I think there's a little more work to be done in India. Although I must admit that the government of India has been very, very proactive. This year in the International Maritime Organization, our paper was sent by India on underwater noise from ships. I mean, the radiated noise from ships. And the IMO has taken cognizance because it had the monitoring mechanism in the tropical waters, which was unique to, I mean, the developed world is doing a lot more, but I think the solution provided by us was considered to be very unique, particularly to handle the tropical waters. So we are happy that Government of India took this up, and now we are also trying to set up something more implementable in the Indian Ocean, because this region has got its own unique issues. I mean, the countries do not have unlimited resources. So how do we bring efficient and effective frameworks, which is going to help us tackle the underwater domain or the underwater or marine environmental issues? Disaster management, again, is a very, very important issue. So there is a lot of work to be done. Already there is a lot of attention, but I think it requires many more participants to come in and a lot more stakeholders to kind of get involved. Again, I mean, with such big projects, freshwater dolphin is a very unique creature, I must tell you. I mean, the dolphins in the freshwater and in the sea are different. You can see a picture of a freshwater dolphin. It has got a very long nose, which it uses as a sonar. So again, I mean, when we, on one end, we have declared the dolphin as a national mammal, marine mammal, but at the same time, the numbers are going down at a very, very alarming rate. So there is a lot more work to be done. And these are all, I think, ingredients of internal security crisis in many ways. So, I mean, development and sustainable development has to be looked at very, very differently. Science and technology, I mean, our understanding of our ecosystem, I think there's a lot more work to be done. Most of our research is not very field-based. It is more of lab-based. So we need to encourage our researchers and also our young students to kind of participate in field work and kind of get into real-world problem solving. So we need to look at it very, very differently. I mean, when I was in Tokyo, I saw a whole lot of systems which are very mature. I mean, the academia and the user as well as the industry seamlessly collaborate and kind of put in work. I mean, if you look at just the EZ, it is 20 lakh square kilometers. Can we expect to have sensors all across? How do we get smart systems into this? It'll require a lot of collaboration across stakeholders. So, but, I mean, data security will be definitely a concern, but I think there are ways of taking care of those concerns and moving forward. This is the framework that we have proposed. If you look at this, there are four sides of the cube, which represents the four different stakeholders. The horizontal construct is that these stakeholders may have their own requirement, but the acoustic capacity building or the capability building is inescapable. Just to give you a sense, the sonar which we purchased or Indian Navy accepted in Russia gave 32 nautical miles as the range, a detection range. The same ship comes to India or the tropical waters, the hardware is the same, but it gives you 5 nautical miles as the range, almost 70% degradation in the performance. And that affects everybody. I mean, it is not just the security apparatus, it affects even blue economic entities who want to do any survey below water. So, as a nation, I think it has to be a pooling of resources and synergizing of effort. A lot of field work is required, then only we'll be able to achieve what we want to achieve. If you look at the vertical construct, we have to have a lot of data sensing or underwater sensing to understand, or collect data, then analyze it based on different applications or different stakeholder requirements, and then only attempt policy. Typically, it has been a top-down approach where we try to import even the policy framework, and it does not work in our waters. I mean, unless you get good capacity building, I think the whole approach will be very, very ineffective. Just to kind of break it down, underwater radiated noise I mentioned, the Navy requires this for acoustic stealth, but the same capabilities or the same understanding can also be used for acoustic habitat degradation for sustainable growth. Ship designers and ship builders also need to look at this. The International Maritime Organization is pushing this very, very hard. So I think if all of us come together, the same kind of resources can be utilized more effectively, and the same kind of know-how can be utilized by different stakeholders. And it doesn't have to come from the defense budget. I mean, everybody can pool in resources. There'll be big money. We say there's not enough money for research, but I think there's a lot of money being spent, but the results we are getting are not so effective. Just to take another example is sediment management. I mean, you can see water resource management, inland water transport, various stakeholders will have this. Even the Sagarmala port-led growth, how do you do port management without dredging or desilting our ports? I mean, tropical waters have their own challenges. So there is a lot more one can kind of pull in and develop. I mean, a lot of our contracts are going to foreign vendors. I think there's a lot we can do ourselves. This is just a broad framework, user, academia, industry partnership. A lot of Government of India policies are already there, schemes are already there, just that we need to put it together under the underwater domain awareness framework. I mean, Make in India is already there, Skill India is there, a lot of budget allocations are there, Startup India is there, Digital India is there. And if you look at the expertise, robotics, signal processing, these are all there in our academia or IITs, and everybody has that. Just that, we have not looked at it from a very, very specific UDA perspective, and that's what we are trying to kind of take forward, and to be able to provide policy intervention, technology intervention, and capacity building. I mean, we have been reaching out, and we are very lucky. We've got a significant recognition. I'll quickly talk about them. This is one of the projects we did. If you look at it, the automated identification system, this is how technology can make it so easy and simple and effective, and very, very cost effective, I would say. I mean, the entire AIS data, which is available to the lighthouses or even Navy and Coast Guard also gets it. DG Shipping gets this data. That has been put through algorithms, and we have got the underwater noise in the region. This can be the map you can see can be used even for marine mammal conservation because they get affected by the noise, but it can also be used by the Navy. So different stakeholders have their own usage of this, and we have developed this particular work into various other applications. So like something like a dark ship detection, I mean, coastal security, there are certain ships which switch off their AIS data and kind of do certain illegal activity. They can be easily monitored, and even if there is a subsurface target, which is as it is not kind of picked up in the AIS data, can easily be detected by having anomaly detection. I mean, the map that you saw here, this is the AIS pickup. And if that is compared with an underwater sensor, you will get. So we have just done a comparison of similar methods globally. Windward is a company which is doing certain things. They are providing solutions, but they are not able to kind of extend this to subsurface targets. And similarly, I will not go into the details of it. So we have analyzed what are the competing methods. And this is what you get. I mean, if you just put an acoustic sensor and do the anomaly comparison, you can easily find a dark ship or any subsurface target in the region. I mean, from a coastal security perspective, I think this is a very, very important solution. This particular project, it won a Global Innovation Challenge in 2019 for its environmental side of it. But we extended this to how submarines can be deployed effectively. That won a defense technology innovation challenge. And we have such similar about 50 innovation ideas which can easily be taken up by startups. We are talking to various people, and we get a lot of young students from IITs and various other institutes who come and work with us on different internships and fellowship programs and develop a lot of our ideas into more matured kind of technologies. Niti Aayog has given us a project for a national capacity building framework. Acoustic habitat degradation monitoring tool I mentioned was presented to the IMO in the MEPC 76. The highest security agency is also considering one of our policy papers to look at the underwater security in a more comprehensive way. I mean, the Navy is very much involved and the Coast Guard is involved in the maritime security, but the internal waters, I mean, the river systems, freshwater systems, I think there is some gap, and I think underwater security is increasingly becoming a concern, and I think they recognize this, and we are happy that we will be able to contribute to some extent. We developed, I mean, you look at massive projects. I mean, the Sagar Mala is, I think, a 6 lakh crore initiative by the government of India. The inland water transport is a huge, but there is not a single academic institution which teaches acoustic survey as a subject. I mean, acoustic survey is required almost everything. I mean, if you want to see below the water. So we developed certain modules, and AICT was very kind to approve it in the last cycle. So now we are ready to kind of collaborate with any academic institutions to run these programs. Certain skilling programs have been approved under the Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana, and we have a tie-up with the Sector Skill Council on capital goods and strategic manufacturing. So we are working with them how to take it forward. We have also developed modules on biotechnology and AI and robotics. So I think that pretty much covers the entire spectrum of skilling and academic requirements in terms of the underwater domain awareness. And now we had a couple of meetings with the Ministry of Shipping also. They want to take the lead in terms of this entire skilling requirement and kind of tie up with the skill ministry and take this forward. So we are very happy that they've taken cognizance of our proposal. Value proposition transparency in the undersea domain, I think it is very important. And I think I will skip this because it pretty much explains. I think this audience is aware of all these things, and you can probably quickly look at this. Digital ocean, I think, will become a very, very important thing. And this requires far more. Digital India, I think, has taken off very well. The government is supporting a lot more startups have come in, a lot of people have got into this, and they are contributing in a very, very different way. I mean, India is such a large country with such diverse requirements. So I think a lot more people need to get involved. And my only request is that the digital oceans also needs similar attention. And we need to look at, I mean, even enhancing livelihood of our coastal community is a very, very major issue, and which will have its impact on coastal security. I mean, something like shrimp farming, I mean, it is so unorganized. Unless we give more data and bring more kind of certainty by monitoring the underwater parameters, and so the farming returns can be enhanced, and even the financial institutions will be more eager to get involved. So we need to look at this very differently. Then looking at, I mean, I think we can go on. I mean, real data is very important. Decision making on real data is extremely important. And I think the effective realization of the Sagar vision can only happen if we truly implement digital ocean. So from that perspective, I think it is very important that we look at this more seriously. We have been doing a lot of awareness, outreach. We are engaging with various people, and we are trying to now sustain our engagement with people. So we run this UDA Summer School. We've been doing it since 2017. We've got very good response. It's almost got the stature of a national program. It's a 6 weeks residential program, 4 weeks in Mumbai and 2 weeks in Goa. We get the support of Bombay University, or earlier it was Pune University, and they provide us complete logistics and all kinds of administrative support. And we get the best of people who come and interact with the participants. And this is a peer learning format. We've had, apart from the students and faculty, we've had even Coast Guard officers, DRDO scientists, and various other PSU officers who have come and participated and kind of interacted. So I think the best peer learning format for this. And you can see we've had the vice chancellors and the most senior people coming from different organizations. Even think tanks have been represented, and even there have been professors of geopolitics from abroad who have come and interacted with them. You can see some of the senior most people. The Chief Minister of Goa has been very kind, right from Shri Manohar Parrikar ji, who took a lot of interest, and unfortunately his health did not allow him to continue and supporting us. But we are extremely grateful to him for giving us a very good start right at the beginning. We do some very unique program. I think I'll not kind of go into the details of this. We do a lot of field work. As I said, Khadakwasta Lake, we have done this field experiment, 5 days of workshop, a lot of data collection has been done. And this is very, very important unless we do field work. So you can see we have hired equipments, and we've been very lucky. We've got support from very premier institutes, NDA, and various other organizations. Nobody has said no to us so far. So you can see various equipments have been put in water, and it was also a PhD work of one of my students, but I think a lot more was achieved. The proposal I would have present today is outreach, where we do these kind of webinars and seminars whenever it is possible, engage with organizations, have certain fellowship programs, have certain collaborative projects. And in terms of sustain, we also have been working on the policy framework so that it can be kind of taken forward. And I would request that a center of excellence, which has got 5 sub-centers, a research center where we do multidisciplinary research, incubation center where the startup ideas are encouraged, skilling center where a lot of these skilling programs are extremely important. And how do we engage our young India that we talk about? I mean, they have to participate in all the new initiative, academic programs, because academic degrees, I think, is a very, very important part of our Indian system. So academic degrees are very, very important. And then it has to culminate into a policy framework. So all these put together, they will have their independent key result areas or key performance areas, but they will all kind of collaborate and also kind of help each other or give inputs to each other. So thank you very much for your patient hearing. And I would now request Alok Joshi, sir. I think he has the best kind of background, in the sense sir has headed RAW and he has been the chairman of NTRO, and I am aware I also have contributed a little bit. It was a very dynamic leadership sir brought to the table and encouraged many people during his tenure. Many startups got a lot of boost under his leadership, and I think the true young India that we talk about does remember sir very well. Sir, I would request you to kindly make your presentation. I'm not doing a very detailed I'm not reading out anybody's CV because they are all very, very well-known people. Alok Joshi, sir, please.
So let me first start by congratulating you for a very comprehensive exposition on the subject. And I'm grateful to you and Mr. Heblikar for giving me this opportunity of speaking on internal and coastal security issues and capacity building. The saying goes that security on land derives from supremacy on the seas. And if you look at the landscape, it has been mentioned by Mr. Heblikar, India's coastline and inland waterways, we have almost 7,600 kilometers of coastline, with nearly 1,500 kilometers in the state of Gujarat and 700 kilometers in Maharashtra, which are in close proximity and within striking range of a very hostile neighbor. And the unique thing is that the coastal and maritime communities and the economies are traditionally, they are based on having outgoing, seafaring and close interactions to areas from where these threats emanate. Certain activities which have security implications have not been viewed as such by these communities. And in this respect, if you look at the interactions of the western coast with areas in the Gulf, movement of goods to evade duties and taxes or customs have been kind of accepted as a norm. I mean, it's part of the livelihood. So there's no sense of you can say security sense that it can have some kind of a threat to the community even. And on the other hand, you have cultural affinities, which have shaped responses over a period of time among these coastal communities. You have common language being spoken. You have, even festivals being shared on both sides of the coastline, all along the coastline, in fact. So the interactions with the outside world has shaped the thinking of the coastal communities to a large extent, both in terms of livelihood and their cultural responses. Having said that, what is the strategic challenge if we look at it? I would leave the to Ambassador Raghavan to expound on it, but my sense is that the Persian Gulf and the Arabian Sea on the east, as well as the Bay of Bengal and the Indian Ocean, should be looked as a continuum, which is leading to opportunities and challenges. As you had mentioned, our oil, food, and strategic minerals security gets impacted. 95% of our trade by volume and 68% by value is via Indian Ocean. 35% of our fisheries are contributed by the marine sector. And we have also you had spoken about strategic minerals along the coastline, which demand protection. Now, coastal security has to be looked as a subset of maritime security, and it involves the protection of the coastal water zone from any challenge that originates from the seas. And as the India growth story evolves, industrial clusters are bound to come up along the coast or in the immediate hinterland. Already we have naval bases, nuclear plants, satellite and missile launching ranges, which are high-value targets for our adversaries. The challenge would be to secure unhindered and safe access to the ports, as well as navigation of waterways from adverse elements that may hinder safe passage. And these would include not only terror groups, but also the local mafias, the underworld that has developed vested interests in marine trade operations by indulging in arms running, drug trafficking, human trafficking, etc. And of course, we have the geostrategic compulsions. You have the strings of pearls doctrine and the growing influence of the Chinese in the Indian Ocean region. Here, I would just like to, recount in 2012, when the Somalian piracy was at its height. It was interesting to find a Chinese submarine as part of the Chinese, flotilla, which was attached to the multinational anti-piracy, squad, so to say. And that was the first time that we realized that, the Chinese had taken such deep interest already in mapping the Indian Ocean region. It made no sense for a submarine to be part of the anti-piracy operations at all. And the other thing, of course, is that as the Quad formalizes, it would demand enhancement of capabilities from all its members, and we can't be seen lagging behind. So we have to gear up to be an active partner of the Quad. And of course, if we have to retain influence in the region, it also demands enlarging our footprint and response capabilities. Why underwater domain awareness is important for coastal security? I think we need to understand that we have to be aware of the strengths and fragilities of our coastline. The topography of our coast is diverse, comprising creeks, backwaters, estuaries, and mapping these areas is essential where natural cover is provided by topographical and temperature variations for both offensive and defensive maneuvers. I'm told, I'm not sure whether it is correct, but I'm told that, temperature variations create pockets where you can have, the space to kind of conceal yourself. Whether it is correct or not, I stand to correction on this point. And deployment of submersibles has been an important element of naval strategies earlier, as was mentioned by Mr. Havlikar during the Second World War, and has now been adopted by non-state actors. If you recall, there were reports about the LTA, and which are later confirmed also, of having training being given to its cadres in underwater operations in the Mangla Dam in Pakistan. Moreover, research and development on autonomous submersibles and their deployment is ongoing and accepted as a next generation capability. And we have, reports to indicate that the North Korean capabilities are very much there, and they have been known to, share these kind of strategic capabilities earlier also. We need to develop our own capabilities in design of autonomous systems, which would assist us also in developing detection and interdiction capabilities. It is very essential that not only we have the capability to do underwater surveys, but also the capability to have, the capacity to detect and to, interdict any adverse threat or any effort to kind of penetrate into our systems. And as you had mentioned, development of sonar and other embedded sensors, especially on buoys for detection of submersibles, would enhance our coastal security. What are the threat vectors? I would like to mention that maritime piracy, terrorism, smuggling, trafficking, apart from the fact that nearly 12,000 ships operate in the Indian Ocean region at any point of time, and their movement needs to be monitored. And also we have unsettled maritime boundaries, in certain, with certain nations in our neighborhood, which pose a security challenge. And we have seen how, there have been difficulties in the fishermen, going out in the region which is close to between India and Sri Lanka, and also the human trafficking that goes along the coastline on the eastern side. And to add to that, I think we also need to take into account the cyber threats to port operations, which now present a new dimension and which can really, triple our port operations at any point of time. What is the framework that is required to enhance coastal security? I think to counter these threats, as you rightly mentioned, it demands a high level of synergy of central and state agencies and effective operational liaison at the local level. If you see, the capacity to collect and collate information and to analyze it in a meaningful way lies with the central agencies. But at the same time, the understanding of the local coastal communities, their problems, their aspirations, and the way forward for effective mobilization lies with the state authorities. Any institutional framework set up will need to address the need to merge these two strands. Current structures with the Indian Navy as a pivot working in tandem with the Coast Guards, the BSF Marine, and CISF would work well as far as coastal security is concerned. But my impression is that we need to take a fresh look for protecting inland waterways, which necessarily have to have state marine police as the fulcrum. this would require central government intervention for capacity building, because as you had mentioned, we have seen the states having very limited resources in this regard. Capacity building for internal and coastal security, one of the major limitations are the current procedures that we have in terms of the financial rules. The GFR, on procurement of goods and services, work on the inherent assumption that the item to be procured already exists in the market, is freely available, its specifications are known in detail, and therefore there is no uncertainty associated with the procurement. The GFR is aimed at avoidance of risk, and there is a need, I think, to formulate a separate chapter in the GFR, keeping in mind product innovation through R&D. And this is a major stumbling block. People don't talk about it so much, but I can share from my experience as chairman in TRO that despite the fact that we had supported startups and in a way that possibly would not be possible by regular institutions, but the fact that you had to kind of handhold them and kind of share the risk. Now, this is something that was not possible under the current procedures, and wherever it has been done through special dispensations. Now, this is not the way to go about encouraging innovation, especially in an upcoming field like underwater domain. And I think we need to really push hard for a revision of the general financial rules. Now, some of the issues that are bedeviling, growth of a strong maritime policy. I think multiplicity of agencies is one of them. You have security of oil infrastructure as a case study where you have the CISF giving security to the platforms, the coast guards up to a certain point, 12 nautical kilometers, and you have the Indian Navy as the overall in charge of the security. But you have so many agencies, the port authorities, to mention a few. Now you need to have some coordination among these agencies, or single strand to look into the real threats that emerge from underwater domain. Then there's of course the low priority focus by the states on maritime security. I mean, even manning of maritime police posts is not through recruitment of communities which are along the coastline. You have people drawn from the hinterland, or shifted from police stations which have had no exposure to maritime security, and those people are being posted there without adequate training. So I think this needs to be looked into very carefully. Then we have a need for advanced surveillance systems, and as you had mentioned, data fusion is an area which needs to be encouraged. Policy interventions, you have the coastal security bill, and which is still pending approval of the parliament. I think you have rightly mentioned that we have to look beyond terrorism and also at non-conventional threats, including environmental issues. So my sense is that unless and until seminars like these push for the agenda of giving proper emphasis on underwater domain, I think it needs to be emphasized to the government that we need to look at the procedures, the processes, and the need also to have a centralized, holistic look at the issues that confront us in the realm of underwater domain and overall marine security. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. I think it was a very insightful and very, very clear direction that you have given, and would definitely discuss more details with you in times to come and seek your guidance in taking this forward. Our next speaker, Raghavan sir, Ambassador Raghavan sir, has been, a diplomat, a career diplomat, and then he was the chairman of the National Security Advisory Board. I think a very unique combination, and particularly for a webinar like this, we are extremely grateful to you, sir, for agreeing to be part of this webinar and sharing your views on this. There could not have been a better person like you and Alok sir before that, and Pratap Heblikar sir kind of putting things in the right perspective. Your time, sir, please.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me. Thank you.
We can hear you.
So let me start by thanking you, Dr. Das and Mr. Heblikar, for inviting me to this discussion. It's really very nice to see the work that MRC, the Maritime Research Center, is doing to both promote research and increase awareness in the various aspects of the maritime domain that need attention, not simply security or science and technology or ecology, but a holistic approach to all this. It's a very, very good initiative, and I really compliment you on that. And also today, of course, we've already heard quite a bit, quite a wide coverage of issues on underwater domain awareness and security in our immediate neighborhood. But given my subject, the topic you have given me compels me to now look above water and a little beyond our immediate neighborhood in space and beyond the present day in time as well, to take a look at what kind of diplomatic approaches we need to the security and strategic challenges that we face in the Indo-Pacific region. And of course, I want to clarify that when I talk about the Indo-Pacific today, I'll be talking only about the Eastern Indo-Pacific. We have many challenges in the West, but I think the challenges in the West are very different from challenges in the East. The partners that we need in the West are very different again. And approaches like Sagar and such like have much greater impact in the West than the East. So let me focus on the Indo-Pacific. Let me focus on some of the things that have been happening recently and some of the challenges that we are facing in the near, that we are going to be facing in the near future. Of course, we've had a number of markers in the recent past, in the last couple of months or so, which focus our attention on the various challenges. The most prominent among them was, of course, the in-person Quad Summit, which was held in Washington recently, but it also followed a very productive virtual summit of the leaders. And unlike in the past, both these summits actually produced detailed joint statements and identified action points and mechanisms for follow-up. A very important development. Then, close on its heels was, of course, the security pact called AUKUS, which probably overshadowed the Quad in many respects. I'll be talking about that as well. We have, of course, reason to welcome it, but it also raises some troubling questions that we should confront as well. Of course, one of the things that AUKUS did was it damaged US-France relations, which will take some time to heal, in spite of course, the very cordial meeting that took place yesterday between the Presidents Biden and Macron. But I think getting Europe engaged meaningfully in the Indo-Pacific is very important for us because, in fact, Europe's ambivalence on China in order to protect its economic interests has actually helped China spread its wings in the Indo-Pacific. And of course, France now that UK is out of the EU, France is the most energetic EU player in the Indo-Pacific. So now all of this, of course, I should have started off with the introduction, except that everyone is aware of this, that India's major challenge, the importance to India's of the Indo-Pacific to India's economic security and strategic interests is obvious. And this has been, of course, emphasized by in various ways by you, Dr. Das, by Mr. Eplikar, and of course by Mr. Joshi as well. And protecting and furthering our interests in the Indo-Pacific necessarily involves the objective of restraining Chinese hegemony and dominance in the region. And therefore, when I talk about Quad and when I talk about these other initiatives, this is basically the backdrop to that. To proceed on what I was talking about, we have the Malabar, for example, the Malabar naval exercises. Again, the second phase was concluded recently. But again, there are issues in the way of the optimum impact of the Malabar exercises as well. Looking further beyond, you've had a flurry of missile tests by both North Korea and South Korea. And more recently, of course, the alleged submarine SLBM test by North Korea, which, if the nature of the test is confirmed, introduces a completely new aspect or issue in the security calculus of the region. So when you look at India's response to the Indo-Pacific challenges, these are elements that we need to be factoring in. Now, the Quad, of course, is the most high-profile demonstration of India's objective of trying to restrain Chinese hegemony in this region. But it's important for us to understand what the Quad is and what it is not. We need to sort of cut through the rhetoric. The fact that the political, economic, and technological expansion of China brings the Quad countries together is, of course, self-evident. But within this commonality, we should also understand that there are shades of difference in approach and interests of these countries on the Indo-Pacific, what they are looking for in the Indo-Pacific, and the pathways to reaching there. And from the Indian perspective, it is most important to remember also that the Quad and other Indo-Pacific initiatives actually address only one dimension of the China challenge for India. There is a continental dimension as well of our engagement with China. And in that, the other Quad countries are only peripherally engaged, especially now after the departure of the Americans from Afghanistan. Also, in spite of all the rhetoric, the Quad is not a security dialogue. All the countries now are unanimous in the official spokespersons of all these countries are unanimous in saying that this is basically not a military or security alliance. It is basically a diplomatic initiative. And in fact, if you look at it, the Quad started issuing joint statements only after the Biden administration came in. That's simply because before the post-Indo-Pacific posture adopted by the Trump administration, which talked about a face-off between repressive regime and a free world order and a combat-ready American military posture in the Indo-Pacific, was not something that made the other three Quad countries comfortable. So it's only now that we have managed to produce focused joint statements instead of, four separate and often disparate individual versions. And therefore, Quad now has a forward-looking agenda. The latest agenda has talked about support for support for manufacture in India of COVID-19 vaccines, distribution to middle and low-income countries in the Indo-Pacific and elsewhere, cooperation to address supply chain vulnerabilities in critical technologies, ensure secure 5G networks, bolster infrastructure resilience against cyber threats, enhance the space domain awareness, and promote sustainable infrastructure development with transparent financial agreements. Of course, a direct reference to the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative. And of course, the signature tune of the Quad, which is commitment to a free and open Indo-Pacific, is forcefully reiterated. Now, all of these, of course, have a security dimension to it, but not in the hardcore military security that people talk about. So what we should see the Quad as is a collective diplomatic effort rather than a security initiative, and to compete with China by developing alternatives to its hegemonistic advance. There is a political thrust for cooperation that is very evident in the Quad. But again, we should recognize that to translate political intention into to translate declaration into cooperation requires reconciliation of national differences and reconciliation of different political approaches, of bureaucratic cultures. So all of this is very much a work in progress. Beyond the Quad, I think it is important also to see that our Indo-Pacific strategy should include collaboration with ASEAN countries, with ASEAN in itself, as well as individual countries in ASEAN. And that is critical to our objective of checking, shall we say, check the advance of Chinese influence. You know, we often talk of ASEAN centrality in our Quad statements, but countries of ASEAN have different outlook and different attitudes to China and different levels of dependence on China. ASEAN itself has articulated an Indo-Pacific concept in which the overriding thrust is to avoid being caught in the crossfire of a US-China politico-economic standoff. So we need to be focusing on countries which have a greater proximity to our position in the Indo-Pacific. And you can talk about Vietnam, for example, you can talk about Indonesia, you can talk about Myanmar. These are countries with which we have growing security and defense cooperation, and which reflects our similar outlook on Indo-Pacific security issues, Indo-Pacific cooperation issues. And of course, one of the major initiatives that India has taken is the revival of what is called the BIMSTEC, the Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multilateral Technical and Economic Cooperation. Of course, it is now, the cooperation now encompasses beyond maritime economic cooperation and security issues, also military drills, the consultation of national security advisors. Now, this is an important initiative, which again, we need to sustain in order to emphasize our interests in the Indo-Pacific region, and particularly in the important Bay of Bengal region. The challenge, of course, in all this remains, and it's a practical challenge, which is to strengthen confidence within these countries and groupings that India will remain consistent and strong in delivering on its promises of support. We have not been entirely successful, to be frank, in the past, and we need to bring a new resolve to this and bring in a harmonious blend of political, economic, and military diplomacy. Now, we also need to recognize in this that, a strong political presence and strategic partnership also requires, it has to be underpinned by a robust economic presence. India has to focus on this reality. Now, we have withdrawn from the RCEP, but we need to be looking at other methods of strengthening our bilateral and multilateral economic presence in the region. That is critical if we have to maintain a strong Indo-Pacific posture that is not lopsided in favor of merely security and political cooperation. Next, you look at the Malabar naval exercises. Again, a very good demonstration, an excellent exercise of enhancing interoperability in a whole range of maritime security operations. It's also a demonstration of solidarity. It is it serves a demonstrative purpose, but we should be, I think, careful about overestimating its deterrent capacity. Among other things, India does not have reciprocal access agreements for forces and vessels of the other Malabar countries, other Quad countries, and that will remain a political problem for us. And that will obviously have be an operational restriction on the deterrent capacity of the Malabar exercise. But you look at the other the Big Bang security pact in the region, which I talked about earlier, which is the AUKUS, which was unveiled and in so much fanfare that it kind of overshadowed the Quad meetings. And according to that, the UK and the US will collaborate to share with Australia sophisticated defense-related cyber, artificial intelligence, and quantum technology to strengthen Australia's underwater defense capability. And all this will, of course, be bolstered by US supplies of nuclear-powered submarines, along with, and this is most important, along with transfer of nuclear propulsion technology. And Australia, according to this, is supposed to build 8 SSNs, of which the first is to be built by 2040. Now, if you look at it, one of the things that we have always been saying about the Indo-Pacific is that if you have to maintain a sustainable security architecture in the Indo-Pacific, you need to overcome the major imbalance of military capabilities in the region. While China's naval strength increases, we are increasingly dependent more and more on America's regional projection of military capability, and this cannot be a formula for an equilibrium. So from that, if you look at it from that perspective, I think we should welcome AUKUS. Of course, India, Japan, and Australia are independently also bolstering their defense budget in recognition of this. But having said that, I think what we need to recognize is that now Australia's capacity, AUKUS will ensure that Australia's capacity will be accelerated in the medium term. But what it has done already, and as you can see, it has given fresh fillip to Chinese militarization in the immediate term. And it has exacerbated Chinese belligerence in the immediate term. And you can see that by Chinese actions in the South China Sea, East China Sea, Taiwan Strait, and even on our LAC. So we have to cope with increased tensions today while we wait for the deterrence capacities tomorrow. I mean, that's one of the challenges that AUKUS presents to us. Another challenge is that, the new and sophisticated capabilities and capacities which AUKUS will create for Australia will overshadow India's own relatively modest and slow-moving naval capability expansion. Now, we do want enhanced military strength in the region to deter China, but ideally, India would have wanted to have a significant part of that enhanced military strength, rather than, outsourcing most of it to Australia and the UK. Again, this is something that our own naval planners have to look at, and our naval acquisition plans may need recalibration, actually. And if this entails seeking external support to fast-track naval acquisitions, again, we need to look at the US to the extent that it will extend it to us, France, which of course Australia jilted in favor of AUKUS, or you have your traditional defense partner, Russia, which will also come into play. But we need to really see how we should respond to the military challenges which AUKUS creates. The other thing that AUKUS has done is it has drawn attention to a loophole in the global non-proliferation regime. And this is not something that we have actually focused on much in India, but this is something that can be exploited by other actors in the region. No, nuclear propulsion technology is not covered by the NPT. So it might actually whet the appetite of many other countries in the region to aspire for SSNs. So you might have another crowded underwater security challenge in our region. Don't forget also that American submarines actually use highly enriched weapons-grade uranium, unlike the French and I think also unlike the Chinese nuclear submarines. So while you can be confident that Australia will not divert the fuel for weapons, the fuel that it receives for weapons, the concern that other countries interested in acquiring SSNs will use the AUKUS example to justify the stockpiling and upgrading of their weapons usable uranium, I think is real, and that can destabilize again the proliferation situation in our region. And of course, when you talk about non-proliferation, you have the threat from Korea, North Korea. Again, we have not really focused much on that in India. The strategic community has not focused much on India. That you have to recognize that though the countries in the West, US and UK and others continue to say that they want to try a denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, as Ambassador Shivshankar Menon noted somewhere, that is a train that left the station long back. The Korean leader understands very well, after looking at what happened in Libya and Gaddafi, what happens to people who give up their nuclear capability. And therefore, the chance of his giving up nuclear capability, I think, is very low. So you're really looking in, eventually the world has to recognize North Korea's nuclear capability and find deterrence solutions to it. Now, what is the deterrence solution? Either you have the American nuclear umbrella, which has existed from the Second World War time, on South Korea and Japan. But when you look at such an external deterrence, again, as Ambassador Menon has noted, people in South Korea and Japan will wonder after some time whether the United States is really willing to risk San Francisco and New York, which North Korea can reach with its missiles, for the safety of Seoul and Tokyo. So this might also then take you to take South Korea to a rush to nuclear weaponry. And if South Korea does so, can Japan be far behind? I mean, these are not outlandish ideas anymore. When you begin to look at the way in which Korea has developed, and if it has actually developed SLBM, which can develop nuclear warheads, then you're looking at a whole new ball game, and you're looking really at a nuclear weapons proliferation in the Indo-Pacific. How are we going to deal with this, and how are we going to deal with the security situation? Okay, I've already taken a lot of time, and I've only touched on a particular aspect, but one last point I want to say. If our Indo-Pacific goals and our continental strategies have to succeed, a refiguring of the US-China-India triangle is very important for us. China calls the Quad a precursor of an Asian NATO. Now, from its point of view, I can understand it, and even if it is untrue, I can understand it saying so. But when Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov starts to echo this, we have a real problem. Because when we deal with China in the Eurasian landmass, whether it is in Afghanistan or whether it is in Central Asia, Russia becomes an important player for us. Even more so as we continue to depend greatly on Russian weaponry. When our defense minister's dash to Russia in mid-2000 actually illustrated this. So we have, of course, tried to, our Prime Minister's initiative in this Russian Far East, in trying to increase Indian investment in the Russian Far East, to activate the Chennai-Vladivostok Maritime Corridor, and all that are intended to persuade Russia that its interests in the Pacific are compatible with our interests in diluting Chinese dominance in the Indo-Pacific. And it also accords with President Putin's own concept of a greater Eurasia. However, unless Russia's relations with the US thaw sufficiently for it to believe that all Indo-Pacific initiatives are not collectively aimed at Russia and China, but only directed at China. Unless this happens, we will continue to face problems in moving towards a sustainable security architecture in the Indo-Pacific. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. I think it was a very fantastic geopolitical perspective that you brought into the discussion, sir, and we look forward to connect with you and seek your guidance. So thank you very much, sir. Now I request Commodore Sujit Samadar, sir, is the founder of SAMDIS, been in the Navy for a long time, and then he has also worked with the Niti Aayog, and a very clear industry security understanding. Commodore Samadar, sir, your turn, sir, please.
I've been listening to this lovely conversation ongoing between Mr. Alok Joshi and Ambassador Raghavan, who I had good fortune to meet some years ago in the National Security Council Secretariat. and I came away certainly richer from that interaction. And of course, before saying anything else, I must record my thanks to you for giving me this opportunity to speak with you. I think I have about 10 to 15 minutes. So I'm going to make it very crisp and clear on what I have to say with regard to the specific subject on underwater domain awareness. So, why my own sense of this whole conversation that we are having on underwater domain awareness and in the context of the Indo-Pacific security revolves around the central theme of this elephant in the room, and I don't know why we should keep hesitating to name that elephant. And that elephant in the room is China, China, China. And I think that should be very clear to any strategic planner or any community which is looking at the Indian situation as it evolves by the day. Now, I'm going to say some things which will give a little historical perspective. Then I'll talk about what the industrial capability on both sides are as far as building of national and naval assets on both sides are, and how that will impact the overall security. That's the broad theme, and what can we do about it in the end of it, particularly in light of the discussion that has been ongoing about the Quad and the newly formed Australia, US, UK grouping, the newer Quad that is coming up in the Middle East, which has already kick-started some discussion. So these are some things that we'll talk about. But very briefly, the Navy, as you know, started the force planning exercise well ahead of everybody else. This was Mr. Blackett who proposed that we should have a 142 ship Navy centered around 2 aircraft carriers in 1949. So that was the fleet which would be the proxy for the Royal Navy here, and which was designed to withdraw from Asia. So they needed somebody else. But at the times we had this new doctrine of Panchsheel and all that do good, etc. Idealism, which should have collapsed in the 1962 war, but we continued to remain sitting on the fence for the next several decades under this hat called non-alignment and all of that, as leader of the G78, whereas at one time we could have been part of the P6. I think that was a huge strategic blunder as far as foreign policy for our country was concerned, because at that time we were in the lead for space, we are in the lead for atomic energy as early as 1946, well ahead of China. So that was some huge mistakes we made in foreign policy. But fortunately, despite no precise directions from the government, the Navy labored on its own. And whilst the 1962 imbroglio happened with a undermanned, under-equipped Indian army, the Navy was in flying colors. We had the INS Vikrant, we had pre-owned seaplanes, we had cruisers, destroyers, and frigates from the United Kingdom. We were flying the Super Constellation rejects from the Indian Air Force, and we had a whole lot of stuff which was certainly at that time the most powerful fleet in Asia. Whereas the Indian Army was not so well endowed, and neither was the Indian Air Force. So the Navy's strategic thinking was always well ahead of its time, and we are fortunate to have some very fine leadership in the Navy, and we continue to have that. So over a period of time, as UK lost interest, we also sugared up to the Russian side, and we saw a whole lot of new inductions which came in. Almost 60 warships came into India from Soviet Union. We got the LR, MRAs, aircraft, which is the most modern maritime reconnaissance and anti-submarine warfare flat. So then we also had the largest ASW platform, the TUs, which came in. We got Kamov 28s, we got Foxtrot class submarines, and we also started building our own ships. So, there was a well integrated and planned out concept. But be that as it may, over a period of time, as we shifted from the UK to Russia to Israel to many other countries, including building up national capabilities, we became increasingly self-reliant. But the interesting part of it is our aim of a 142 ship Navy centered on 2 aircraft carriers still remains a vision which is yet to be realized. So we are at that particular state, and at the same time, whilst we learned all about building ships and a lot of electronics and artificial intelligence and all of those systems came in mostly from in-house officers of the Indian Navy, and they are outstanding officers in our service who actually thought this through. And we are today designing these combat management systems, working closely with the research and development establishments for development of technologies and new products. And we have a fairly good record, which any naval officer will be proud of in terms of being really truly Atmanirbhar in this whole game of maritime security. But what has changed now? I still remember when I was principal director Naval Plans, every cabinet note used to start off with this whole story that we have got 7,500 kilometers of coastline, 2.2 million square kilometers of EZ and Falana, this, that, and all. At the end of it, we wanted Minesweeper, or at the end of it, we wanted destroyers of everything else. But today, that thing has now changed. It's no longer 7,500 kilometers or 2.2 million square kilometers. It is the bloody Indo-Pacific, which starts from the east coast of Africa to the waters of Australia. And we have, as the Prime Minister, Honorable Prime Minister has said on various occasions, we are looking at the role of being a net security provider in this region. And therefore, the Navy's expansion is not a narrow security imperative. It is an inescapable national economic necessity. The whole core principles of security, safety, regional stability, and sovereignty directly impact the economic well-being, the prosperity, the development of our country most severely. And it's vitally necessary why we should build up the Navy quickly so that our Prime Minister's vision of a $5 trillion economy is realized. Now, let me give you some facts to tell you where we are. When we look at India's record of shipping, all these facts are well known to all of us here. 95% of the trade and 70% value comes by the shipping route. But do you know that India's global shipbuilding share is 0.15%? Are we proud of this after 75 years? We have 28 shipyards, 4 are bankrupt. The balance are only surviving on orders which are issued by the Ministry of Defense. We can build aircraft carriers and nuclear submarines, and we can build our vessels up to 240,000 tons DWT, but we don't want to build LNG carriers or container ships and car carriers. We have to import them. Are we proud of this? Are we proud of the fact that our ship repair facilities are minimal and completely non-competitive? Even the SCI goes to Dubai, Colombo, and China to get their ships refitted and repaired. Is this right? We are part of the International Convention on Prevention of Marine Pollution. We need to completely transform our ships so that they are able to continue to trade with the rest of the world, but we are not doing that. Are we proud of that? Then when you look at shipping, this is particularly significant for us in terms of the overall understanding of what is meant by security, not just as being a military power, but the impact of shipping on our overall well-being of this country. Our share of the merchant fleet by deadweight tonnage is 1.27%. And out of that, 36% of our Indian-owned merchant flags are flagged outside India. Coastal cargo. Australia does 17%, even Bangladesh carries 16%, Thailand 12%. Some other countries are in the range of 11 to 24%. And with such a huge coastline and so many national waterways of so many thousands of kilometers, we carry 6.4% of the total water transport. Only 54% of the coastal cargo is carried on Indian ships. Rest of it, thanks to the stupid cabotage rule which we have got, is carried on foreign shipping. Even a 5% model shift of cargo from roads, rail to coastal shipping would save us close to $1 billion annually in logistics cost. I'll give you some numbers on EXIM cargo. So this cabotage is a short view. It is obviously driven by the interests of the shipping companies from foreign countries who have now entrenched themselves in our ecosystem and are able to move this around to their benefit. When it comes to export-import cargo, can you imagine we have only 7.5% of India's EXIM cargo carried on Indian hulls? It fell from 46% in the mid-90s to 7.5% now. Of course, trade at that time was much less than what it is now, but only 7.5%. We spend almost $65 billion to foreign flag ships to carry Indian cargo. If you can just take 5% of that, we can build our own cargo carriers, our own LNG carriers, our own car carriers, cruise ships, you name it, because that's all integral to the overall growth of the economy. We are the 4th largest consumer of oil, with 4% of the world share. We are the 5th largest exporter of petroleum products, but the Indian flag tankers are only 1.5% of the total tankers in the world. We are the 5th largest importer of petroleum gas, with a share of 5.5% of the global cargo. And what is our share of the carriers? 0.3%. We have a global export share of 7.1% of limestone, 51.3% of granite and stones, and 11.2% share of fertilizer imports. And what is the share of bulk cargoes? 1.5%. Similarly, exports of iron ore and particularly iron ore, very important, and coking coal. Both of them are very, very important for us. What is our export share? 1.8%. And how many ships do we have? That's part of the earlier share of 0.5% that we have. 1.5% of bulk carriers. The same bulk carriers also carry ore for us. We import 253 million tons of coal, 66% of it coming from Indonesia and Australia. And how much does SCI bring in? 4%. 4 million tons, I'm sorry, 4 million tons. In a conversation we had with two of the larger, let's say, plants that convert ore to steel on the East Coast, out of 550 cargoes in a year, only 35 cargoes come on Indian ships. We import 5 million tons of fertilizers and 3 million tons of rock phosphate. And all this is coming on the same bulk carriers, probably owned by the Chinese. So, the point is that Indian EXIM cargo has a huge risk of freight subjugation and monopolistic manipulated freight rates that can play havoc with our economy. And unless we are smart enough to have this have the shipping and shipbuilding system in place, we are looking at a situation that we may not be able to fight the war in the grand old way of being able to win the war without fighting a bullet. Because this is our weakest point, and I'll expand on it further. Just to give you a very simple example, I commanded a minesweeper in 1987. It was a fairly new minesweeper. Today in 2021, there is no minesweeping capability in our country. Zero. The case for a minesweeper was pushed in 2004, and hundreds of babus pushed hundreds of red ink on it, green ink in it, and all of that. At the end of it in 2021, Indian Navy has no minesweeping capability. Why is this important to us? Because the PLA Navy has 50,000 sea mines. And I'll get to the numbers of submarines, and each submarine can carry, I'm sure Arnav knows the figure better than I do, but certainly 16 to 24 mines. They can actually put all our ports out of action in a matter of weeks. Can you imagine what that will do to our economy? How it will impact the social fabric of this country without production crude, without iron ore, without coking coal. We had a few days of coal issues here, and you saw the chaos that was created in the social media. So we have extremely vulnerable ports. We have extremely vulnerable security lines. We have extremely vulnerable access to commodities and resources. And we are spending our time worried about some Doklam and some other places in some nondescript areas. That is the wrong place to look at. This is where the game will be, because the war can be fought without firing a shot, or without even coming in contact with the forces, so to speak, by doing all these other things. So what have we done as far as the strategy is concerned? The last strategy document that we had, which was issued some years ago, says that our strategy is to determine changes required for the sea routes to reduce risk. So we better get to it pretty fast, because we might have the sea routes, but we don't have the shipping to carry our cargo to and from our ports. We have to also promulgate new selected routes and work together with other companies for shipping. Control over movements and routes followed. Measures to ensure safety and security of shipping in own slocks. Now, this is very critical. How do you do this? Just to make this motherhood statement and do these measures and do that and all is not going to take us anywhere. Diplomacy or military effort aside, we should never forget the Malian dialogue from the Peloponnesian War. The weak will do what they want. Sorry, the other way around. The strong do what they will, weak what they must, or words to that effect. So we really have to get this going as far as the mercantile shipping is concerned. It's not a security imperative, it's a vital economic necessity. And unfortunately, the entire system, the whole of government approach is lacking in building up the shipbuilding industry in our country. We have cockeyed policies made by people who have not the faintest idea about shipping or shipbuilding, and we are still where we are. Our 28 shipyards, we have a huge, beautiful shipyard which is now gone to NCLAT for no rhyme. It's a strategic asset. It's the only shipyard between Dubai and let's say Korea, which can build a 300,000 ton DWT, which can also repair aircraft carriers. But we are letting it go to ruin because of a bunch of cockeyed rules that we have made about debt and all of that other stuff, purely financial issues, which is now holding hostage to what is a critical security requirement. So when we look at warship building, the story is not so grand either, and I don't want to recount it in some negative way. But the facts are good known. We should know that ISC one started in 1980, approval granted in 2003. 18 years have passed. We still don't have the ISC one. So Vikramaditya was purchased by India on 20th January 2004, and I was very involved in it in my last job in the Navy to try and get it because the cost had inflated, but we were able to win that discussion and get it. ISC 2, equally grim. We still don't know what to do with it, whether we should be a 70-ton DWT with nuclear propulsion, 40,000 DWT with electric propulsion, a normal aircraft carrier with this propulsion, or that aircraft. Come on, we have now spent from 2011 is 2021. We still don't know what kind of ISC do we want. There's something drastically wrong. I mean, this is not okay at all. Then we look at conventional submarines. We had a 30-year submarine building plan which was approved by the cabinet in 1999, which required us to have 24 submarines in 30 years. What have we got? What have we got? We haven't even got 4 submarines so far. And this other contract that we are discussing about on the P75I was ongoing from 2006, and now some very intricate strategic partnership model has been made, which will see if everything goes well. This is the third time or fourth time we are attempting this P75I induction. We will be very, very fortunate if we get these P75Is by 2036 to specifications of 2019. Do we understand that? 2019 टेक्निकल स्पेसिफिकेशंस पे 2037 में हमारे P75 आएंगे. ये क्या सही है? So, this is not happening. 24 submarines by 2028, we'll be lucky if we get 6. So that didn't work. Nuclear submarines, we did a great deal of work on it. 1983 move, we got the Arihant in, we got Aligat in. We also had some very exceptional work that we did in terms of putting the SLBMs on board. But come on, 4 SSNs in 41 years compared to the Chinese shipyards who made 12 SSNs in 15 years. We now have signed up some leads with the Russian chairs for the chakras and the appropriate training that has been done. Similarly, on destroyers, the 15 alphas is a grim story. We took 3 ships. It took 14 years to build the 15 alpha ships, and a cost escalation of 186%. The 15 Bravo started in 2011. It's 2021. We are in somewhere in between, and still going on. Similarly, we are now looking at 6 Project 18 next generation destroyers. But when will that come? And that's supposed to be a very nice, very good plan of 11,000 tons. But the point is that these are just moving on paper, if at all. Where are these ships, and when will they come to us? Frigates, same story. I really don't want to get into this because it's a miserable program of what we have done in shipbuilding. But be that as it may, it's not such a grim story. At least we make our own ships. At least we have our own weapon systems. At least we have our own electronics in place. We have many things in place. But we have to sort out this whole process so that we can't be tied to this obnoxious document of acquisitions that we have written, which makes sure that we can't where the fight is always of not getting it rather than how to get it. Fleet support ships, come on, we are here designing aircraft carriers and destroyers, but to get a fleet support ship, Hindustan Shipyard Limited has to contract with a Turkish consortium to design and build them. Come on, is this right? We got to figure this out. MCMVs I spoke about at length. It's a national necessity. 2004 हो गया, 2021 हो गया. We don't have a single minesweeper in our country which can do anything about demining our ports. Can you imagine this situation? What will happen to our entire population and the entire economy if our ports are mined? And that's extremely, extremely doable. And we've got nothing that we can do about it. We've asked,
I
DSU.
request you to sum up in a minute, sir.
Yeah. So against all this, the Chinese side has done pretty well, and we must live up to the fact that they got a huge navy going. They're going to be 450 ships. But when you look at what's happening in the Indian Ocean region, particularly the Quad, some discussion took place on what would be the role of the Quad and how much reliance can be placed on the role of the Quad in any event that happens in the Indian Ocean region. At the moment, the math is clearly not in our favor. If you look at what the Chinese can throw at us in the Quad, would be more than what the total US, Australia, India, and Japan. Japan would of course not be able to provide any such support in the Quad here, which will be able to do. Plus, we also need to understand that just apart from the hard assets on the oceans and below the oceans, there is a huge amount of technology which is also happening in space. Today, every Indian ship can be marked and pegged by the adversary whenever they want to do it. So we need to be aware of what that is happening. So essentially, the one soft underbelly, it was a soft underbelly of China for many, many decades in the Indian Ocean, has transformed itself into a very powerful and muscular six-pack stomach, with the added qualification that China has the will to exercise that power in the region. This is unprecedented. So, whatever might be the geopolitics of the region and all this Vasudeva Kutumbakam and all that other stuff that we want to talk about, and whether we work with the Quad to the east or Quad to the west, and whatever other groupings that we want to talk about, at the end of it, it will be India alone who will have to meet the obvious belligerents of our northern neighbor. We certainly hope that diplomacy will succeed and we'll have better relations with our neighbors in the common interest of sustainable development of both our two countries. But these are idealistic. So while that may not be the best thing, because hope is never a great strategy to follow. So in these respects, we need to make some course corrections, and I think if those people who are listening will have to put their money where their mouth is, so that the navy quickly goes up to certainly face up to the coming battle in the Indo-Pacific. It's not a question of it's just a question of when, and I think we better be prepared for it as early as possible, because the stakes on it are huge, are huge, are huge. So since we don't have time, I thought I'd suggest some way forwards on this game, but we'll be happy to take some questions later on. Thank you once again for the opportunity of speaking with you on really the underwater domain awareness part of it and the Indo-Pacific region, and specifically on what kind of navy that we need to ensure that the Indo-Pacific remains at least stable and our sovereign rights are exercisable in this domain. So with these words, I look forward to any questions that there might be, and thank you once again for the opportunity of speaking with you today. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your remarks, sir. I'll request Preetam Banerjee, sir, to make his presentation. Sir is working, he's been part of the industry for a long time, CII, and now he's with Asian Development Bank. Your turn, sir, please.
Thank you very much, Commander Das, for giving me the opportunity to speak at this very esteemed gathering. I am perhaps the least qualified to make remarks. I have heard with great interest and learned a lot over the last 2 hours from the esteemed speakers, Ambassador Raghavan, Joshiji, of course, your own presentation. I will keep my remarks very short and keep it limited to perhaps where I can add some value in terms of my domain expertise, which is in logistics. And I will not, repeat the extremely important points made about the, maintaining the sea lines of communication open for our trade and industry. I think that is a well-known fact that Indian industry depends a lot for strategic resources, both from energy perspective, but also from industrial raw materials from both its eastern and western coast. We have dependence on Africa, we have dependence on Indonesia, Australia, and some other Southeast Asian countries for these raw materials and energy. So obviously, keeping the the lines of communication, maritime lines of communication open, is a critical need for industry. What I will focus on are three things. One is, Commander Shamadar was speaking about, I think, a very important point. I'd like to add some qualifiers to that. In terms of the overall connectivity for the country, as was pointed out, there is a lot of dependence on foreign flagged vessels. This is true, but I don't think it's true from a China being the dragon, the elephant in the room in this case. The maritime sector has become an oligopoly for a while. Till about the early 1990s, the maritime sector was much more competitive. If you look at the container trade, about 12 companies control 80% of the global business. Now, all of these 12 companies, most of them are European. There's one big Chinese, major company, but several of the large companies are not from Asia. So this is uh, a challenge that has become amplified by the pandemic, and we are seeing a significant amount of oligopolistic behavior leading to problems for countries like India, the exporters and importers. And this is not unique to India. Countries like the United States are facing similar problems, and it has shown how vulnerable we can be if there's an oligopoly that controls our external connectivity with the rest of the world. So there are definitely urgent requirement for government to come up with legislative and responses to it. The US is looking at some very proactive measures to do that. We should probably look at the same. But let us not confuse two issues, while both of them important. One is about promoting our domestic capacity for shipbuilding with flagging of Indian vessels and having ships that are more under Indian companies' control. Now, if I am an investor in a shipping line and I want to flag my vessels, Indian vessels, I would like to buy the ships from wherever it is most competitively priced. I don't have to buy it from an Indian shipyard. I can buy it from anywhere and flag it in India. If I choose not to flag it in India, I think it was mentioned by Commander Shamadar as well, there are many other issues, fiscal, taxation, etc. I'll not go into the details, which acts as disincentives for flagging a vessel in India. So that's one part of it. The other part of it is promoting shipbuilding. That is something that points have been well made, but to what extent it actually serves our connectivity need needs to be set aside. I think it is a more strategic aspect to it in terms of developing our shipyards over the longer term for economic employment, development, employment, technological upgradation. Those things need to be considered. In terms of the connectivity agenda per se, we need to perhaps focus on getting the regulatory architecture right that will, as was correctly pointed out, help shift more cargo to the coastal mode, because these can become strategical challenges. For example, just one illustrative example, lot of our power plants in the southern peninsula, especially in the eastern coast side of the southern peninsula, depend on coal and other resources that come from Odisha, Bihar, Jharkhand belt. Most of it moves by very congested railway routes, bulk carriages. A lot of it can move by coastal cargo. It is not happening because we are not investing in incremental port capacity, handling facilities, and of course, the right kind of incentives for coastal carriage. So, and I'm not going to delve into the details of these issues. I think the point is that the overall connectivity framework needs to be looked at, and I will now try to connect that with the underwater domain awareness point I think we are connected here to discuss. Now, I am sure a lot of you are aware that Prime Minister Narendra Modi recently launched a very important initiative called Prime Minister's Gati Shakti. The Prime Minister's Gati Shakti is essentially a multi-modal connectivity project for the whole of the country. What is unique in this project is exactly the problems that we have been discussing in the maritime sector has always been true in the logistics and connectivity. What is that? The fact that our transportation infrastructure has been developed in silos. You have road transport ministry doing its own thing, the shipping and ports doing its own thing, aviation doing its own thing, railway doing its own thing. The idea is to bring all of them together and create a multimodal connectivity plan or a national master plan to take care of our hinterland national needs. Now, the logical next step to this was, one of the steps to this was to create a multi-sector, multi-layer mapping of what exists in transportation. So, BISA again, which is the Bhaskaracharya Institute of correct, forgive me, I'm getting the acronym wrong. It's the ISRO's geospatial mapping entity. It's called BISA again. They have been tasked with this activity to create this multi-layer map. Now, as I listen to the discussions that we have had so far, whether it's for the dredging aspect for ports or the fairways for the inland waterways, what was mentioned about the security aspects of the greater ecosystem of the ports, the management of the economic, our extended economic zone, all of this would require this exact kind of mapping of what exists, whether it's the platforms for petroleum, natural gas, undersea cables. In the future we are looking at having extensive aquaculture, and in fact growing things like seaweed in extensive scale for our economic needs. So a lot of things will be happening over here, for which we need to have this mapping done. Just like BISAGAN is doing this multi-layer mapping, in some sense, the underwater domain awareness is an extension of Gati Shakti, and I would urge all the esteemed speakers over here to perhaps make this case wherever they can, that the Prime Minister's Gati Shakti should include this dimension and not ignore it, because it's as critical and as important, and it is seamlessly a part of it. So that's one large point I would like to make. The second that I would like to make is that there is urgent need from an industry perspective to look at our port management. So while the Sagarmala project has allowed several ports to come up and has allowed private ports to also come up, rightfully so, and they are doing, some of them are doing fantastic work. The big challenges remain in managing the whole efficiency of port operation, by where we are extremely poor. If I compare the extended port operations in India, in any major port today, with ports like Port Klang in Malaysia, Singapore, any other port in Eastern Asia or Southeast Asia, we are, in all indicators, we are below, fairly. And a lot of it has to do with how we manage our ports. Our costs of ports are also very high. Oftentimes, it is blamed on high drilling costs, etc. Now, it is not my business to second guess what the Ministry of Shipping and Ports and Shipping is saying, but our geography is not that unique from many of the other Southeast Asian geographies. They have similar challenges of silting. If I look at Port Klang, which is a Bay of Bengal port, they have similar challenges. So I don't see why they do it better and we can't. So these are the kind of questions we need to ask as a part of our engagement, and perhaps look at it in the PM Gati Shakti. Last quick point I would make is that what coastal shipping needs, you're moving bulk cargo. Let's take, for example, limestone for cement. Now, why does coastal cargo doesn't often turn up to be more expensive than, let's say, a road or a rail movement? Because you have multiple handling. You have something coming from the hinterland, the raw material that has to be handled at the port, loaded to ship. Ship moves to another point, unload, handling, and then again hinterland. So what typically you would want is a handling and port near the plant where the raw material is being used. So you need to have a strategy, as many countries have done, to look at the specific jetties which serve a particular plant. It's not a port, you don't need to develop a port everywhere. The Sagarmala recognizes this. But in order to build jetties, the ecosystem, both at the land side in terms of the environmental and other aspects, but also on the sea side, needs to be closely looked at. And if you don't have this, underwater domain awareness that you are referring to in a comprehensive way, we will never be able to even start planning that, okay, I can link these plants with these jetties and move to coastal shipping because I can achieve to do that. So this entire modal shift, let's say even taking away 5 to 10% to coastal, as was mentioned, requires these interventions very, very significantly. I will not take up any more of your time. I'm so grateful to you for letting me be part of this conversation. I learned an enormous deal, and I wish you the best of luck, and I hope to stay connected and be part of these conversations in the future.
Kamra,
Thank
thank
you
you
so
so
much.
much. You made some very pertinent points, and we will definitely take this discussion forward. And I mean, I know you were part of the Prime Minister's launch of the Gati Shakti initiative, and thank you very much for your very, very insightful remarks. And we will keep in touch and take this forward. Thank you so much, sir. I would request Professor Prabhu sir from the Honorable Vice Chancellor of Manipal University, Jaipur campus, to make his remarks. It's very important, and that's why I tried to keep it towards the end. Academia has a very, very important role, and Manipal University and the group has been doing a lot in that respect. So, Prabhu sir, your comments, please.
Okay, so first of all, thank you very much. And it is a nice group of people and officials are talking on a particular topic. And although I heard and I also know about the requirement, but I may not be the expert, especially on this geopolitics or this underwater. But one thing that it is very important to know from the part of the university. A little bit about our university. Of course, Manipal is known for education and healthcare. And Manipal is a place in the southern part of Karnataka on the coastal belt. And of course, when we talk about sea and underwater, of course, it is very, very close to us because I was in Manipal for about 30 years with the same group. And the place where I stay, and in the evening and the morning, we can clearly see the Arabian Sea there. And we keep hearing some of the strategy, some of these security aspects we keep hearing from the Coastal Guard. And we know to some extent how important and how sensitive these issues are. And yes, from the last 3-4 years that I'm in Jaipur in Rajasthan. And when you talk about Rajasthan, of course, the challenges are much different, may not be connected directly to the underwater and sea, but the challenges and the security aspects are concerned is different. But as a part of the Manipal group, we have established this university, Manipal University Jaipur, in 2011. So this year is also very important for us. It's about 10 years. So we are celebrating this 10 years. And it is a state private university. And in the 10 years, with the support from the group, as well as our partners from the industry and other organizations, so we have done pretty well. And as far as the quality is concerned, yes, we are the first university in entire Rajasthan now to get the NAC A+ accreditation. As you know, the National Assessment and Accreditation Council is the one which assess the quality of the academic programs. We are very happy on those lines too. And of course, media rankings are also coming out very well. And this is the very young university. And today 10 years back we started with about 300 students in a one discipline of an engineering. And today we have nearly about 52 academic programs, and total number of students is almost 10,000. So in the 10 years, so that is the growth that we have seen. And parallelly, we are very good, advocate. And by the same time, as a part of the group policy, both quality and quantity must also go together. So this is in brief about our university. So now, even the universities are also changing and looking for a major shift, especially coming out with this National Education Policy NEP 2020, which speaks a lot about the multidisciplinary kind of program. So now, from the university point of view, also it is a very important for all of us to know about the challenges that now we are speaking in this particular seminar and the webinars. Because one thing is very important, we need to concentrate on the capacity building. So let us say that all of us are quite aware, and I'm very happy to see the people who have put their life in these kind of the arena. And today, to address these challenges or moving forward the next challenges, especially on the cyber and digital and online, so we need to build a very strong the new generation, and that becomes the responsibility of the universities. So gone are those days where it is a very conventional things are coming. Of course, when we speak 10, 15 years back, it is all the conventional programs. So today, and most of the time, I believe that universities are not thinking differently. It is because of we have a habit of blaming the regulatory bodies. But today, the situation has completely changed, and I'm very happy. I have seen the attitude of the regulatory body from the last 30 years when I joined as a teacher and today as a vice chancellor of this university. So regulatory bodies today are the facilitators. They have sat in this particular position, and any kind of a new programs and emerging programs that we need to develop, so then they are very, very happy and for, and lot of flexibilities are given to the universities. So with these kind of an outlook from the regulatory body and the kind of the blessings that the UGC as well as the government is giving, and at this juncture, and having the new structure like an National Education Policy 2020, if the universities are not thinking differently to start the new programs and to create the new capacity to address these challenges, I think we will definitely going to miss the train. So this is the very, very important time for all of us. And recently, I am very happy that Anab and his team have visited us, and there is a lot of discussion which happened, and I'm sure there would be a couple of programs that we would be launching it soon to develop these kind of a capacity to the country, because there are few things that we cannot purely depend upon the overseas universities as well as the students or the technology from them, because there are some sensitive issues are available. So I think we need to develop these kind of programs. So but other than that, my the knowledge or the competence to speak on this webinar is very, very limited. I will just be very open enough to help in this particular program to develop many academic programs and develop some kind of a competency in the university in an academic setup. And if at all, if there are some kind of a focused research need to be done, okay, one is while doing the research, yes, my faculty and student will get some kind of an additional knowledge. Students' employability skills will be improved. That is the second part. And the third very, very important point is we will have a satisfaction. Being as an Indian university, being a very young contemporary university, we are doing something for the country. And this is something, even if there is a small delta variation, that if my university is develop its position or a possibility to develop and given to a particular organization, and finally it's going to implement, and that kind of a satisfaction is something that which we need to do it. As you know, the research university has one is the disseminating the knowledge, the second one is to creating the knowledge, which is the research. And the third very important point is it must help to the community or to the nation or to the people at a large. So I would be very happy to take part in any of such kind of new initiatives that we have. And I would be very happy to have all of you at your own convenient time. So please visit us and also inspire this young generation as well as my faculty. So because that will help us to take it to the next level. So that is the only one thing from the university side. I would be very happy to come here and also to participate. But nevertheless, I would be very happy by listening to all of you, the kind of the challenges that you posed and it would be an additional knowledge to me. So thank you very much, and wish each one of you a very happy Diwali in advance. Thank you very much, and over to Arnab sir.
Thank you so much, sir. It was indeed very encouraging, and we would definitely discuss our future collaboration. Thank you so much, sir. Last but very important, I would request Professor Madhav Nalapat, sir, to kindly give his perspective. I mean, he's the first professor of geopolitics in India, again associated with the Manipal group, and has a very clear thought process on this. Nalapat, sir, your turn, sir, please.
Thank you very much, Arnab. And I'm delighted to follow Dr. G.K. Prabhu, a very dear friend and colleague. And I'm also, frankly, delighted to share in the optimism that GK has. Yes, we have multiple problems, and we have had them right from 1947. Forget that before 1947, we were not free. But the reality is, Arnab, that why is there hope? The hope is these are problems concerning the system. These are not problems concerning the people. The people of India have enormous potential. And, even if, for example, companies have come into India, tech companies and other companies, now they recruit individuals from India. And what they find is that recruitment, the individuals are really not up to the mark. But they find, to their astonishment, that within about 6 months, a year at the most, on the job, or in the sense of doing the job to learn the job, our youngsters pick up the skills, pick up the depth of understanding and competence needed to handle jobs, as well as people who have studied, much more intensively than they have, and worked far more years than their 6 months or 1 year. So this is why, for example, companies are looking to come to India. And the problem is, and has always been, something that a few of us were pointing out for several decades, but which finally is being taken seriously. I'm happy to say the Prime Minister Modi came to power in 2014 on the very correct statement that minimum government is needed for maximum governance. And you have all kinds of regulations, all kinds of, fortunately, things are changing. And I would like to say that, yes, from 2014 onwards, in my opinion, things have changed quite a lot. And they are hopefully going to change even more. But the reality is that, Arnab, we got rid of the British, but we retained the colonial mode of administration. Now, what does that mean? The administration that we retained was not the administration the British used for their own people. It's not British administration for the British. It is British administration for the colonies, for people who are, I'm sorry to say, enslaved. And the advantage of that to the rulers is that it's relatively easy. For example, in India, it's not rocket science to say, filing a case, creating a legal process, getting some kind of a thing done. It should not happen, and we have a very fine judiciary, but that judiciary is highly overworked, but it can happen all the time. So it's very easy in India to block something, much more difficult to promote something, especially if that something goes against the interests of some vested interest, whether Indian or foreign. I know, for example, young technologists, in Hyderabad, they had a talk with me. I had a further, and they were telling me, frankly, and they had come from different parts, and they said that it's very frustrating. We have got good technology, we have developed it, and when we find that this technology, when somebody else finds that this technology is on the way, they want to take it, usually a foreign company, and when we say, no, it's not going to happen, very soon we come across all kinds of obstacles. We come across queries, and we come across, all kinds of obstacles And eventually, we are either forced to migrate or hand over technology to this foreign company, or migrate to a foreign company and develop our own technology. We are simply not allowed to have a technology that competes with established vested interests in India. That has been the case for a very long time. And as I said, I am happy that since 2014, some changes are taking place, very welcome changes are taking place. And I think hopefully that will continue. But that is the reason for my optimism. The reason for my optimism is we are slowly moving up the gradient. We are no longer stuck where we were or sliding even further downhill. We are moving up the gradient. And may I say, the main engine of that, of course, one is the leadership. There's no question about it. It's very important. The new education policy that Vice Chancellor Prabhu was talking about is an example of that. And a lot of other simplifications are in procedure are examples of that. But most important is the immense vitality and capabilities of our young people. And that, frankly, is a very, very good material for us to work with. I'm very happy. For example, I heard, the last 3 or 4 and I heard about the Indian shipbuilding and Indian shipyards. And I would say I fully agree with him. I'm delighted he's so straightforward about it. And I do wish he'd write sometime in the media or something about these matters, because the fact is that the public needs to know when we are talking about something, this is very sensitive. The reality is that the enemy has already probably found out. Certainly, high-level people will know. The only people who do not know are the public, the voters. And they are the people who should know, because they are the people who can change a government. They are the people who can re-elect a government, as happened in 2019. So this is the point. There has to be a dissemination of a dissemination of information about the problems in the system, so that the resistance that builds up is even bigger than now. Because today I can tell you there is resistance, especially among substantial resistance. And people are simply ignoring a lot of these obstacles that are created, or pointing out to these obstacles, and basically, ensuring that those who commit them are frankly punished. Because it's, in my view, for example, destroying an Indian tech company, Indian tech startup, to promote a foreign company is nothing short of treason. It is high treason, if you ask me, because that Indian tech company is the future. That Indian brain and Indian mind working in India is the future. So, and what is happening? So many of them are driven abroad to work for India and for every other country. That's good. They should work for every other country. But why abroad? Why can't an Indian work equally easily in India? It is happening over the last 4 or 5 years, especially from 2020, 2019, 2020. Definitely a lot of changes have taken place. There's no question about it. And hopefully many more changes will come. So that is the optimism, the reason for optimism, the first reason. The second reason is this is the Indo-Pacific century. You had the Atlantic century. You had, whether it is the Second World War, the First World War, or whatever it is, or for some decades after the 20th century. Substantially into the 20th century, it was the Atlantic that was the focus of geopolitics and the pivot of geopolitics. Today, it is very much the Indo-Pacific. From around, I would say, 2011 onwards, or 2013 maybe, it is very much definitely the Indo-Pacific. And it is critical. It is critical not only to India, it's critical to the United States, it's critical to ASEAN, it's critical to the Gulf countries, to the African countries, to the Far Eastern countries, that the Indo-Pacific be kept free, secure, and accessible to all. In other words, there is no blockage caused by some hegemonic intent or activity in the Indo-Pacific. So let me say that this is not just a battle of India. It's a battle involving all these countries as well, because all these countries are going to be choked, and all these countries are going to have to be subservient and subsidiary to other countries that are doing the choking, which is something that India has experienced for a very long time, the yoke of domination by an external power. And I don't think too many people in Asia, Africa, Latin America, Europe, North America, or any part of the world would like to accept that. We don't like to accept intellectual domination. We don't like to accept any other kind of domination. So there is therefore a strong, if I may say so, tailwind if you look at it in that sense, leading to cooperation among these countries. And I've seen for myself, I've talked to several people who are leaving China. Several companies are leaving China. Why are they leaving China? I mean, they're leaving China because today the Chinese state expects, for example, tech companies, especially if you're a Taiwanese tech company, to hand over all the data that you have in all the markets that you have. Forget data in the PRC, they already have that. Data in India, in the US, in Europe, everywhere. And of course, we all know what the PRC will do with that. It will feed the artificial intelligence machine of the PLA and prepare for the kind of eventuality that one of our discussants was talking about the ports, very brilliantly, if I may say so, again, very correctly pointed the danger of, So I'd like to say, therefore, that there is a strong movement away from China. And India is ideally positioned to take advantage of that movement if our systems are made better. They're improving, but it's a work in progress. They need to be made much better, but they are improving. And if they do improve, and if countries abroad, if companies abroad know that they're improving, well, they will start coming to India, as they have slowly started coming to India. 2021, you're seeing much more interest in India than in 2019 or 2020. 2020, of course, is a very unusual year. In 2021, I'm happy to say the first 6 months or so, a lot of interest in coming into India and basically setting up in India. And I hope that will continue, and with the systemic changes that are planned and which I hope can be implemented. Why is there a problem? The problem is that there are strong established vested interests blocking any changes. If you go to Afghanistan and you go, for example, during the time, of the warlords and the Taliban, etc. The Taliban, of course, all the warlords, the main warlords came in the Taliban. So they became the Taliban. So there were no more warlords because they were all Taliban. They were renamed. Almost everywhere you'll find a roadblock. And unless you pay a toll in that roadblock, you can't get through. With the result that it takes a very long time to reach anywhere. And these are the obstacles that are created in India. Every obstacle, most of them are totally unnecessary. And they're only tolls for rent collection. And this is the structure, the superstructure that has bred so much of illicit wealth and illicit benefits at the cost of the country. And it is this superstructure that fortunately is slowly, very slowly, finding itself being dismantled. So I'd like to point out the geopolitical winds are now in our favor. The demographic winds are in our favor. And very importantly, in terms of governance also, the mood in the public is definitely shifted. In the past, there was a belief, after all, sarkar to hai, it has to be the government delivering everything, government doing everything. Well, that mood is completely gone. One of the main reasons being, of course, that government has delivered very poorly and it has delivered very little compared to what can be delivered if there is greater freedom of action in the private sector. or in the, in various other sectors where individual initiative is concerned. Point one. Point number two, if there is more independence of action given, for example, to the services. I have argued 20 years ago, 25 years ago, that you should have in the Defense Ministry joint secretaries, additional secretaries, and secretaries who step in with uniforms. Why not? They are the ones who know whether, what is needed. They are the ones who will be on the front line, whether you're on the Navy, Army, Air Force, or paramilitary force. You're putting your life on the line. You're on the front line. Obviously, you are. Why was the discussant I was talking about so worried? Because obviously he has been on the front line, and he knows what the problems that are faced. Whereas you have individuals who will never go near any kind of front line, frankly, who will never go anywhere near that, taking decisions that affect the front line. So I do hope. In Japan, in the US, even in Britain, in Germany, in all these places, the uniformed services play a significant role, if I may say so, in decision taking in the Ministry of Defense. I don't see why they can't do that here. Domain knowledge is important. This is the 21st century. The age of the generalist, frankly, vanished about 300 years ago. Certainly about 30 years ago in the case of India. And therefore, you need domain people. And when I say domain people, I don't mean people who have somehow, gone through, if I may say so, the mill and acquired this degree or that degree while they're in service or off service, because regrettably, many of these are not combined with any value in terms of practical utility in getting things done. I'm talking about domain expertise that can get things done. Operational efficiency, domain expertise that leads to operational efficiency, which can be proved only on the battlefield of work. So promotion on the basis of efficiency, effectiveness. All the existing systems, whatever it is, they can continue in the sense of social justice. But the reality is that inside, the promotions have got to come on that basis, and there have got to be clear benchmarks for that kind of judgment. There cannot be a situation by which everybody, for example, is either good, very good, or excellent. A handful are good, most of them are very good, and quite a few are excellent. It's not possible, because we are not seeing results being delivered that are commensurate with those characterizations, at least so far as my knowledge of the English language is concerned. I'd like to point out that the Quad, don't feel, in a sense, unhappy about the Quad. That's not enough. The Quad, I can tell you, it's like an iceberg. A little bit of a tip on the surface, quite a lot of it under the surface. And the Quad is only an indication. It is the tip of the iceberg that shows what is going on underneath. And I think whether it is the Quad, whether it is AUKUS, that is a very large iceberg. And that iceberg is, I think, active. And different countries are, I think, active. You have a situation in which I know, for example, in the media and in social media, there's been a lot of criticism, for example, of Prime Minister Modi and External Affairs Minister Jaishankar, Defense Minister Rajnath Singh, for not more openly and calling out China. Well, the fact of the matter is that, in my view, based on what limited knowledge I have of their functioning, they are certainly aware of what is likely, which is almost certainly the dynamics is propelling China towards some kind of a situation in which it hopes it can create a situation in which it kind of damages India's image significantly. And I can assure you, efforts are on to ensure, not only by India, but through its partners, that on the contrary, it is they who are going to get an unpleasant surprise. But the reason why they are silent about China, where the Prime Minister, for example, does not name China, He doesn't want to be another Xi Jinping. Jaishankar doesn't want to be another Wang Yi, bullying and bluster and abuse. They don't want to give the Chinese any excuse to say, we are doing all this. We are creating this ferocious buildup. We are creating all these, all these tension points because we are under threat from this very aggressive country, India. Nobody can say that based on what the top people in India, the people who count, are saying. So I think that is frankly a very sensible decision. It's, to a very substantial extent, that goes for other countries as well. But I can assure you, from my, as I said, my limited knowledge, they may not say anything because they'd like to show, for one thing, democracies are different from authoritarian states. And certainly India and some of its other, the friendly countries, do not believe in wolf warrior diplomacy and in abuse, bullying, and bluster. They believe in taking people along for a free, open, and inclusive Indo-Pacific. So I can only say, Arnab, that work is going on. Now, I can still not predict in the short run, next 5 years or so, what will happen. Whether they will, an attack, in my view, the risk is very, very high. That attack, in my view, the probability that it's going to be China that faces the brunt this time is rising with every passing day. But there is a situation in which there is a time period in which this is happening, and I don't know what is going to happen during that time period. But my expectation is, no matter what, there is definitely going to be a very steady progress towards a situation where the Indo-Pacific is safe. And those countries believing in freedom of navigation will keep that safe against any authoritarian force. So that is a situation. Even if there is some setback, it will be a very limited temporary setback that will be put right very soon, because that setback itself will create a very powerful dynamic. Every action of China, proving Newton's law to be right, has created a very strong reaction, except that many of the reactions have been, what I can describe here as iceberg reactions. So may I say, the winds of geopolitics are now favoring India. They favored China in the 80s, in the 90s, and for quite a bit of time, if I may say so. They got away. They should not have been favored. From the 90s onward, they should not have been favored. They continued to be favored. From the 90s, India should have been favored. We were not favored. But now, over the last 5 or 6 years, definitely the winds are now, the gods of fortune are smiling much more on India than they did in the 80s and 90s. And frankly, they have started frowning at China. We have to ensure that policies are framed that take advantage of these favorable geopolitical currents, that take advantage of the new opportunities. For example, industries relocating from China, whether they're American or Taiwanese, or mostly American and Taiwanese, some Japanese as well, India should be the default home. And it can be, one systemic change is reaching a level, which I hope it will do in the next 1 to 3 years, that it becomes obvious that the system is now transforming itself. So I'd like to say, we have not reached there. It's a tough slog, but we are on our way there. And this is why I would like to say that yes, all that I heard here is absolutely true. In fact, I would like to say that the language that you have used is much more polite than the language I would use in these situations. If you see my writing, you will see, it is polite language, of course, but this has been going on for way too long. And now we are a country of young people, and the young people need a bright future. The demographic dividend has got to be utilized. Our problem is utilization. Utilization of resources, utilization of talent, utilization of potential. And that is what needs to change. And that can only change by much more widespread participation, by much more widespread, involvement of civil society and the different wings of, if I may say so, the governance system. For example, in the case of defense, the uniformed services, they need to be actively involved in decisions in the defense ministry, and they need to be involved at the level of secretaries, joint secretaries, additional secretaries, under secretaries, at that level. I mean, whether it should be a revolving door or they should stay there for 3 years, 5 years, as they do in some countries. I'm not going to go to that level of detail, but it's important that this be done, and I'm hopeful that this will be done in the next few years. I can assure you, I am the person in the 1990s in Times of India. I used to talk about India becoming a superpower, and I was laughed at. Well, today we are on track to become the third largest economy in the world for some time, and we are still way below the first two, second being China, but we are at least the third in terms of PPP, and definitely we're going to be the third for a long time to come until we become the second, and finally, hopefully, we become the first. But I've been warning for some time that this is an opportunity for India, and may I say, Arnab, the next 2 or 3 years are absolutely critical. This is when the tailwinds, the smile of fortune, everything is shining upon us. And if we do not seize this opportunity in this window of time, that opportunity may pass us by for a generation or more. And our population, the demographics of it, cannot permit that. So I am certainly hopeful that Prime Minister Modi will succeed in his mission of transforming the system and bringing India in line with the 21st century, because I can assure you, it is the governance system in India that needs to change substantially, because thanks to the colonial model, it affects everybody, and it has been a block on progress, creating much lower rates of progress than now. But the governance system can be a catalyst. If it sees itself as a catalyst rather than the essential, if not the only ingredient in everything, it can be a catalytic event. It can be a catalytic, element, but it cannot be the only element, or at all. But unfortunately, many in the colonial mindset believe it to be the only element that is worth considering. That is changing. It is changing very fast. You can see the changes in writing. You can see the changes in conversation, in social media. Our country is changing, Arnab. And I would like to say, I'd like to end this thing by saying, look, I mean, if you're talking about non-experts, I'm the most non-expert in this particular forum. But I do think I share one thing with you, a desire that our country should do very well and reach somewhere close to its potential. In our own small ways, each of us are trying to see what each of us can do to ensure that this happens. What is in this particular conference is a very big step in that direction. I certainly hope people in the governance system will be listening, because I can tell you, those who are not listening, they are on the wrong track of history. They're on the wrong track of their own careers, if their careers are going to be more than 5 or 6 years more, because attitudes are shifting, attitudes that kind of mindset are shifting. So I certainly hope that they will change, and if they do change, I can tell you, the people in our government, in our civil service, most of them are very outstanding people. They're very outstanding people. And if they understand the limitations of their role, if they understand the catalytic, factor that is their role, then I think things will move very well indeed. They have started moving in the right direction. Let's hope that continues. And I must say, Arnab, that the conference that you have held, I think what has been said should be disseminated among decision makers, among civil society groups, etc., so that the public is aware, but also, if I may say so, not just what is wrong, but what needs to be done. There's no point diagnosing a disease without at least mentioning what the cure is. So diagnosing the disease and the cure. And please don't believe there's no cure. Please don't believe that it's not going to happen, because there will definitely be a cure. I'd like to say that, there is a book by a Chinese leader called Mao Zedong, and that book is called Protracted War, on Protracted War. I would advise everybody to read it. There, Mao says there are two types of people who should be avoided. One are people who say there will be an easy victory for the Chinese, for the communist Chinese military over Japan. Easy victory for the Chinese militaries over Japan. Such people are completely unrealistic. They should be removed. And second, people who say that the Chinese military will lose. Defeatists should also be removed. So those who are overconfident, those who are underconfident should both be removed. And those who have the right level of confidence, in the sense of a belief that things are not beyond repair, that they are being repaired, and they are being repaired even better in the future, these are the people we need. That is the mindset we need. And I do believe that this mindset is what more and more people are. I'm witnessing more and more people see this. I'm seeing this in them in India, and I am much more hopeful now than I was, let us say, about 6-7 years ago. Thank you very much, Arnab, for giving me the opportunity to participate in this wonderful meeting with these wonderful people. I'm so sorry that I couldn't stay longer, but I just want to say I'm very grateful for the chance for you to have given me this chance of addressing this extremely important audience that needs to be involved directly in decision making in all the critical areas that they know so well and understand so well. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. I think very well put at the end. I think we have come to an end of a very, very fascinating and very, very insightful webinar. In the end, I would request Alok Joshi sir and Raghavan sir to probably just say a few words, maybe a minute each or 2 minutes each. Alok Joshi sir, would you like to just give your final remarks?
Thank you, Arnab. I think it was a most remarkable seminar, on a subject which has not really impinged on the consciousness of people to the extent that it should have. And I must say that I was very impressed by the kind of expertise that was brought to the subject. And to take it forward from here, I think we need to encourage, pilot projects being organized in different parts, through various departments, just to give them a sense as to how important this subject is. I think, different ministries which found mention today during the seminar, they should be approached to bring forth, their resources. And, I think your organization can work as a platform to bring them together. And as I said, it is ultimately a demonstrative effect that is going to kind of take this whole subject forward. So, and for that, I think between you and the Indian Navy, I think there's a lot of room for collaboration. Thank you so much.
Thank you so very much, sir. Sir, fortunately, the Indian Navy has now been kind enough to say that they would like to sign an MOU with us, and that process is on. Hopefully, within a month's time, we'll have an MOU with the Indian Navy to jointly work on the security aspects of the underwater domain awareness. Thank you so much for your kind comments, sir. I would request Ambassador Raghavan sir to kindly say a few words at the end.
Thank you very much. It was a great pleasure for me to be with you and to listen to such a wide range of views and facts as well. And as Mr. Joshi says, I think this needs to be carried forward by spreading awareness, more awareness. You need awareness and advocacy. and both need to be combined with a broad base. I think you're on the right track. You have started this process of spreading awareness. And if you're also going to be working with the Navy, I think you need to work also with civilian research agencies and perhaps other think tanks which are in ocean research and in various other the civilian, the science and technology and ecological aspects that you were talking about, which are very important and which need to be fused into security, because these silos, someone mentioned this, I mean, you mentioned it probably, the problem of silos, which need to be you need a process of fusion by which the silos fuse into each other. And that's something that I think it's a daunting agenda. But I think this is a work which is well in progress. And all the best to you for taking this forward.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you very much. Pratap Heblikar, sir, the last word, and you may like to thank everybody on our collective behalf.
I think the last 3 hours have been most productive from the point of view of getting to know people, to getting to understand their way they look at the issues from a professional point of view. Not only we have professionals, we have people who have actually been practitioners in the field across the spectrum. And the ambience that has been created is very, very favorable. I think we no longer need to be underwater. We now need to come above so that we continue the quest of education and information. Yesterday, I was hosting a cyber security awareness program at the XIMU in Bhubaneswar. And the kind of interest the student community generated made a lot of sense. Like what we have discussed today, we need to broad base the dissemination of information. And I have always been advocating the fact that government should stop in working in silos. We need to have salience across the spectrum so that a country like ours, we have the best possible advice and the best possible execution plans going ahead. I think what we have seen today has been things have gone to a very higher trajectory. We are now looking at things from very horizontal, not horizontal, we are now gone vertical. And I think we need to build on the capacity we have developed today. I think what has been said by Monu Nalapat, my dear friend, and by Commodore Samadar, whom I had met long ago, makes something, it gives you two sides of the coin. What have we missed and what we should not be missing. And between those two, what is it that we can do the present, the future. So I think as far as I'm concerned, today's webinar that has met my aims and objectives. It has been, in such a manner that we have been able to bring a wide range of perspectives to the table and generate discussions. I would like to first thank my colleagues Alok Joshi and Ambassador Raghavan for having readily agreed to have joined us today. Also to give us their views, because both of them have been in such positions in the government that they have a 360-degree view of what needs to be done and what has to be done. The one point I would like to add to what Alok said is important, that we have today 9 state governments which have coastal responsibilities. All those 9 state governments need to be brought to the same platform, because there is a greater need for the coastal policing to become more efficient, to become more vibrant. And it is not the Coast Guard or the Navy's duty. It is the states themselves have to create the interest, the infrastructure, the paraphernalia for this. Plus, there are other areas that we need to look at. For example, what Professor Prabhu said about the universities becoming the platforms or the groundswell for knowledge to be disseminated. So I think we have a large number of takeaways today. I think we need to sit and see, put each of them in a slot so that we tick off all the boxes and ensure that whatever has been said, like what my colleagues have just said, that we need to inform the government. Monu Nalapas is very correct. That is the last several years we have seen a great movement forward on strategic thinking, and where we feel that yes, the government is now on the right track. The government is being supported by the industry to the extent possible, and that yes, we need to develop more of our own muscle and sinews if we need to be counted in the future. I think with this, I would like to firstly place on record my grateful thanks to all those who spoke today, all those who brought things to the table. For example, what Mr. Banerjee mentioned about the private sector. So I think there is a great amount of interest generated, and I think as we go forward, we'll probably see a greater interaction with everybody who's concerned with this subject. So with expressing thanks and gratitude to all those who spoke today, I would also like to thank the participant and the audience who have been with us for the last 3 hours, and I'm sure that when they go back to their book and pencil, they'll know that they have covered some distance today. Thank you, Arnab, and God bless.
Thank you so much, sir. Ambassador Raghavan sir, Alok Joshi sir, thank you so much. Sujit Samadar sir, Professor Prabhu sir, everybody who spoke, thank you very much. Heblikar sir, thank you very much for allowing this to happen and coordinating. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you.